Chapter 1046. Lu Huaxi and the rest of the Dark Angels, as well as the giants, were unable to withstand the pressure from the ancient scroll. The bones in their entire bodies emitted creaking sounds as if they would collapse in the next moment, and their skin trembled and rose and fell indeterminately like the waves of the sea. Some of the weaker giants and the fallen angels with only one or two halos spat out blood and fell to the ground. Retreat! That old bastard Saint Emperor is crazy. Lu Huaxi's eyes were filled with fear as he gritted his teeth and shouted. These meteorites were too solid and heavy. Each of them was comparable to a 10,000-foot mountain. It was no exaggeration to say that they could smash the second sacred mountain into pieces. The sacred emperor was desperate. He would rather give up the second sacred mountain to smash Jiang Tian to death. Retreat! Yi stomped his foot and decisively gave the order. This was a battle between golden core cultivators. It could move mountains and fill seas. With their cultivation, they could not participate at all. They would only be implicated. Most people retreated. Only Huang Linger and Jiang Tian stood side by side. She planned to use her wood elemental spiritual body to restrain the meteorites. Jiang Tian's eyes revealed a trace of pity, but in the end, he shook his head gently and stopped her. Wood could restrain earth. Originally, spiritual wood could restrain earth elemental attacks, but that was only in a battle between cultivators of the same level. The meteorites in the scroll were too big. They were already at the level of a golden core or even a nascent soul. Even if it was just one attack. Huang Linger had just built her foundation. The gap was too big. How could she resist it? Very good. You have a spatial Dharma artifact. That's already very impressive. In the face of the monstrous pressure, Jiang Tian's face was calm. He looked up at the meteorites and said indifferently, but it's still too weak to deal with me. In his previous life, Jiang Tian had once taken Lian Feng, the crown prince of a secular kingdom, as his disciple. Lian Feng was handsome and intelligent. He was the most handsome man in that kingdom and also the most talented person in cultivation. It was just that he was obsessed with painting. He once said that his eyes were untainted by worldly and evil things, and his heart was only devoted to painting cute things. Moreover, he was indeed quite talented in this field. When he was 6 years old, he had once drawn a bird. The bird was vivid and lifelike, and he had obtained the bird's charm. After adding the finishing touch, the bird flew out from the painting. He was very talented in cultivation, but when Jiang Tian taught him the way of cultivation, he was lazy to cultivate. Seeing that he refused to change, Jiang Tian was disappointed and removed his name from the sect, severing their relationship. Perhaps he was well versed in governing a country, but he was too obsessed with painting. Even when the Nanman kingdom invaded, he did not care. He was still immersed in painting and calligraphy. When he woke up from the Tao of painting and calligraphy, the Nanman kingdom had already breached his capital and was wantonly massacring the common people. His parents, the former emperor and empress of the Tang dynasty, had also been killed. The Nanman soldiers were parading their heads through the streets. When Crown Prince Lian Feng saw this, he immediately went crazy. He knelt on the ground and wailed, saying that his eyes were untainted by worldly things. He did not see the suffering of the common people, did not see the covetous eyes of the enemy, and said that his eyes were useless. He had always been a sincere person, and sincere people were often extreme and stubborn. He immediately gouged out his own eyes. He used his own blood to paint on the ground. His strokes were divine, and his blood fell like the wind and rain. In an instant, he had painted Yama, demon god, ghost soldiers, ghost generals, and limitless hell. In an instant, the entire capital disappeared and turned into 18 layers of hell, trapping the enemy's army of 100,000. Some of the enemy's experts tried to escape, but they were captured by the demon god and dragged into hell. After that day, his kingdom and the Nanman kingdom were finished. Crown Prince Lian Feng's heart withered. Although Jiang Tian lamented the misfortune of this disciple who had been expelled from the sect and was angry at his incompetence, he still doted on him. After hearing that his kingdom was destroyed, Jiang Tian rushed over to save him, but he was just in time to see this shocking scene. Jiang Tian walked through the dark abyss and hell and felt his regret, grief, and despair. At the same time, he pitied his talent and accepted him as a disciple again, guiding him to cultivate. Under Jiang Tian's guidance, Crown Prince Lian Feng started with painting. He gradually understood his own Tao and stepped onto the path of cultivation. In the end, he combined cultivation with painting. His brush was like a beam, able to create and destroy the sun, moon, and stars. Splashing ink into a sea, able to drown millions of cultivators. Meticulously painting, he could create a world with endless vitality, comparable to a true god. He also became a supreme immortal emperor, known as Immortal Emperor Tian Tuesday. He had once nurtured a heavenly emperor who entered the Tao through painting. In terms of painting, Jiang Tian could be said to be a master of painting. He was a master figure. These scrolls, to put it bluntly, used the Tao of painting to form a space and absorb the earth elemental yuan qi from the meteorites into it. Compared to Crown Prince Lian Feng's, who could create things out of thin air, condense reality with charm, and even create and destroy a world, it was still incomparable. At this time, the giant meteorite was getting closer and closer to Jiang Tian. Its speed was also getting faster and faster. The friction with the air caused large balls of flames to explode. The front of the meteorite had already turned into magma and flew backward. Break! Jiang Tian roared. He held Ling Er's waist and leaped into the air. He punched the sky and blasted upwards. The incomparably thick green wood true essence of the swaying divine tree condensed in front of him. A towering tree skyrocketed. The shadow of the swaying divine tree grew larger and larger. It was over 1,000 feet tall and became more and more solid. Its huge roots and branches danced wildly in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had spread thousands of meters long. Like a cyan phoenix, it swayed back and forth in the air as it charged towards the numerous meteors. At this time, although Jiang Tian's cultivation was suppressed to foundation establishment level 3, his true essence reserves and cultivation were comparable to golden core cultivators. At this time, it was simply earth-shattering. Rumble. The many branches of the swaying divine tree were like giant dragons baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, grabbing the meteorites tightly. Everyone thought that the swaying divine tree would be torn to pieces by the meteorites. After all, each meteorite was 1,000 meters tall and there were many of them. However, a surprising scene appeared. The swaying divine tree's dermic power gushed out and absorbed the energy of thousands of giant meteorites. The meteorites collapsed and disappeared one after another. What? The meteorites disappeared. Lu Huashi rubbed his eyes as if there was something wrong with them. He was shocked and in disbelief. What kind of divine power is this? Yi was also confused and shocked. Jiang Tian's fighting style was too magical. It was like an ancient legend. His dermic power is so vast, Yi Xiaoman's beautiful eyes widened, almost popping out of their sockets. It was as if she had seen something unbelievable. This is an ancient scroll. It is comparable to the attack of a nascent soul cultivator. What is Kang Teichu's cultivation level? Mei Ji was also shocked and her body trembled. He's just a mortal. Saint Joan of Arc couldn't believe what she was seeing. This guy is not afraid of the celestial phenomenon attack. Where did this tree come from? Why does it look like the legendary world tree? The people of the Templar Hall were all shocked. The Seven Saint Prince was even more devastated. Many of the Grand Elders' faces were as dark as water. Their hearts were filled with anger, and their faces were filled with shock, as if they had seen a demon. This swaying divine tree towered into the sky, and it was over 3 kilometers tall. Between its branches, there were sparkling and translucent stars that flickered and flickered. Green strands of primordial aura hung down, and the tree trunk was still constantly extending into the void, as if it could hold up the sky and connect to the universe. It was too shocking. Celestial Master Jiang is invincible. Invincible. Countless giants and fallen angels cheered. But then, something even more shocking happened. Jiang Tian had no intention of retreating at all. He stepped into the air and soared into the sky, rushing towards the first sacred mountain like a rainbow. Good, good, good. He is going to soar 90,000 miles. Celestial Master Jiang is going to attack. Overturn the Templar Hall. Good job, Celestial Master Jiang. Crushing the Saint Emperor is like beating a dog. The other experts of the giant tribe and the fallen angel tribe felt their blood boiling. They were overjoyed, cheering loudly. Jiang Tian's power was beyond their imagination. He could actually neutralize the attack of a celestial phenomenon cultivator. Chapter 1047. Kill again. The Pope's face was as gloomy as water. His eyes were bursting with cold murderous intent. He raised his right hand and waved it heavily. Boom! Another ancient scroll unfurled above Jiang Tian's head. In the painting, heavy snow filled the air. It was a world of ice and snow, and an extreme chill spread out. The snow was like a mat, and the ice crystals were like millstones, pouring down from the painting. The snow-ice crystals were all sparkling and translucent like crystals. They were extremely beautiful. It looked beautiful, but it was extremely dangerous. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly and reached absolute zero. Jiang Tian had encountered a few overlords who were good at ice attacks on Earth, such as the Ice Witch of Caucasus, the heaven-reaching Master Ovina, and the Snow Demon on the Sword Tomb Island. However, their ice and snow attacks, be it in terms of speed or scale, were far too inferior when compared to this scroll. Their ice attacks could only cover an area of 1 to 2 kilometers or even a few hundred meters. Also, casting spells required a certain amount of time. If the opponent was fast enough, they could quickly escape. But once the scroll was unfurled, an area of 100 miles would be frozen and the temperature would drop to absolute zero. All living things would be killed. Even though the sun was very close and shot out thousands of golden rays, it couldn't melt the ice at all. Even though Jiang Tian used his true essence to protect himself, Jiang Tian and Huang Linger were quickly covered in a layer of white frost. Their eyebrows and hair instantly turned white like two snowmen. Huang Linger was so cold that she shivered. Her body stiffened and her lips turned purple. Even the whirling divine tree stopped growing. The frosty yellow leaves withered as if its life was about to be cut off. Kill again. Seeing that Jiang Tian seemed to be frozen, the Holy Emperor sneered. A savage smile suddenly appeared on the Sage Emperor's unperturbed face, and his chilling killing intent grew even thicker. Boom! Before Jiang Tian could break free from the snow weather phenomenon, another scroll was unfurled. This time, a white lightning bolt as thick as a water bucket struck down and stretched for several kilometers. It was like a dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it struck down at Jiang Tian and Huang Linger. This lightning bolt was extremely powerful. All kinds of extremely rare electricity and energy were like arrows piercing through the heart. It could instantly turn titanium into atoms. Holy Emperor, you have successfully angered me. Are you forcing me to use my cruelest killing move? Today, I will tear you to pieces. Jiang Tian looked at the weak Huang Linger and said slowly with a cold and fervent murderous intent in his eyes. At this time, several meridians in Huang Linger's body had already been frozen and broken. This was the first time Jiang Tian that his own people had been injured in front of him since his rebirth. Although it was just a few fine meridians, and with Jiang Tian's ability, he could quickly repair them after the battle ended. But to Jiang Tian, this was still unacceptable. At this time, Jiang Tian's anger could not be contained at all. As he spoke, starting from the corner of his mouth, the layer of ice on his body suddenly cracked and ice pieces of various sizes poured down like rain. Kang Te Chu, even if you are a peerless genius, even if you are the reincarnation of an old demon like in the legends, even if you are a nascent soul-old monster, I can still kill you. Because the power of the heavenly state's Sage Hall is not something you can imagine. The Sage Emperor rose to his feet and proudly roared. He thought that once the lightning scroll was used, there was no doubt that he could kill Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian did not say a word and stepped into the void with his right foot. The void trembled, and the purple lightning rings in Jiang Tian's eyes shrunk and expanded. His purple lightning eyes were instantly activated. Suddenly, two purple lightning bolts that were not inferior to the lightning scroll shot out from Jiang Tian's eyes. They became bigger and bigger and soared into the sky like giant dragons. The purple lightning dragon soared into the sky, melting the snow and ice and destroying everything. It was dozens of miles long and charged towards the lightning scroll. Boom! The three lightning bolts collided violently and tore at each other like three giant dragons. They suppressed and devoured each other, but suddenly disappeared together. At this time, Jiang Tian was drenched and soaked. He carried Huang Linger and soared into the sky. The swaying divine tree behind him also surged crazily. What? A trace of panic appeared on the Holy Emperor's face. He stood up and roared, "Continue to kill." Boom! The last scroll was activated. It was the descent of the heavenly fire. This type of heavenly fire was extremely powerful. It was said that the ancient deities had gathered the fanatical energy in the depths of the universe and used a secret technique to infuse it into a scroll. Its terrifying power was comparable to the true fire of the sun. One after another, giant fireballs shot out of the scroll. They were dazzling and had a temperature of 10,000 degrees that could melt gold and iron. There was nothing that could not be burned. They surrounded Jiang Tian. Kill! As Jiang Tian shouted, a black water azure dragon came out from the top of the swaying divine tree behind him. The azure dragon was several hundred meters long. Its scales were as dense as green jade. It was majestic and mighty. Like a twisted train, it skyrocketed. Surrounded by dark and heavy water, it opened its bloody mouth and roared at the sky, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The azure dragon spewed out streams of black water like a river. They crashed against the shore and poured towards the fireballs. Sizzle! 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 Water vapor rose and white fog filled the sky. It was as if huge white clouds were constantly spreading. Under the crazily surging black water, the huge fireballs were actually annihilated and disappeared one after another. What? How is that possible? His Dharma form is so powerful that it's not even afraid of the heavenly fire scroll. That's an ancient treasure made by an ancient deity. Seeing this, the elders of the sacred hall were stunned. They couldn't believe it, as if they had seen a demon god. They had lived for a long time and had gone through thousands of battles. However, this was the first time they had seen someone as powerful and terrifying as Jiang Tian. Suppress him! The sage emperor yelled hysterically. He couldn't accept that a mortal that he had treated as an ant dared to provoke him and even had the upper hand. Kill! Kill! Go! The seven Saint Prince and the other senior members of the sacred clan of light broke out in cold sweat and shouted in fear. Kill! The elders seemed to have woken up from a dream. They roared in unison, either striking out with their fists or summoning their artifacts, attacking the Xianshui azure dragon, the whirling divine tree, Jiang Tian, and Huang Linger. Suddenly, a palm covered the sky and thousands of rays of light flashed across a mile. They crushed the air and made the air explode. There was a spear that was like a dragon, flowing down like mercury. It was like an enormous silver waterfall as it bombarded downwards, causing the mountains to shake and the earth to shake. Its momentum was astonishing. A sword tore the sky and destroyed everything around it. The fierce and murderous sword intent could crush the divine soul of an early-stage Foundation establishment overlord. They attacked together with the power to destroy the world, as if they were going to destroy the second sacred mountain. There were light crystals in the dantian of those elders, which were equivalent to an early-stage golden core cultivator. Each of them was quite powerful. If they had come to Earth, they would have been able to defeat the superpowers and the modern army. They were overlords who could be called divine ancestors. But right then, they were attacking Jiang Tian together. Today, I'm going to kill you until you're terrified. No one can stop me. Jiang Tian raised his eyebrows and shouted. He was really angry and his murderous intent surged. He used the 3 divine bodies and the divine powers of the purple lightning eyes to his heart's content. The branches of the swaying divine tree trembled and swept in all directions. The green energy that hung down blocked all the attacks. Roar! The Xianshui azure dragon opened its mouth and a substantial sound wave came out. It crushed the spear dragon and waved its giant claws, as if it were going to swallow the world. In the blink of an eye. With the whirling divine tree protecting them and the Xianshui azure dragon paving the way, Jiang Tian also broke through 5 times the speed of sound with Huang Linger in tow. In just 3 breaths, they had traveled dozens of miles. They were only a few feet away from the giant square of the first sacred mountain. Kill! The 12 elders went crazy. They shouted and their blood boiled. Their power surged to the extreme. All of a sudden, they pulled out their swords and jumped into the air, slashing in the air. They jumped, swung their swords and slashed at the same time, as if they were the same person. Many cross-shaped light swords made of supreme-grade light crystals were condensed with a vast amount of sacred light. At this time, each sword light was several kilometers long. They were extremely sharp and could cut through mountains and rivers, and destroy huge cities. In the end, the sword lights crashed down on the profound water azure dragon with the weight of Mount Tai. That combined attack was enough to kill a top golden core overlord. Clang! 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 There was a loud noise, as if a bullet train had hit a piece of metal. It was as if the 12 elders had been shot in the chest by a cluster-guided missile, and they were all sent flying backward while flailing their arms and legs. Many of them spurted out golden blood. Some of their light swords were broken and some of their ribs had caved in. They had apparently been seriously injured. However, they finally managed to slash the Xianshui azure dragon into a half-dead state. It let out a mournful cry and was almost annihilated. Chapter 1048. Ha, Kang Te Chu, it's time for you to die. Seeing this, the 7th Saint Prince coldly smiled, feeling immensely proud. Mickey also shook her head regretfully. Kang Te Chu was indeed very powerful, especially in a filthy place like Earth. It was even more rare for him to cultivate to such a level. However, he was still no match for the powerhouses of the Senate. The Templar is unshakable. Saint Jean heaved a sigh of relief. Huh? Seeing this, Jiang Tian was slightly surprised. He had thought that he could definitely kill his way to the first sacred mountain after activating 2 divine bodies. He didn't expect the 12 elders to be so proficient in joint attacks that they could block his attack with their swords. Jiang Tian was only slightly surprised, but the 12 elders were scared out of their wits and sweating profusely. The 12 heaven-hunting light swords combined attack was originally used to deal with the extraterrestrial demons that might invade. It was extremely powerful. They had cultivated together for hundreds of years and had already reached the level of perfection. They thought that they could even kill a nascent soul stage cultivator, but they didn't expect that they could only block one of Jiang Tian's Dharma forms. However, Jiang Tian soon calmed down. He hadn't used his full strength just now. If he did, how could the 12 elders resist? Jiang Tian stepped on the void again and his body shot up. At the same time, his divine body of gung metal was activated. Above the head of the originally flickering Xianshui azure dragon, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was a supreme warrior holding a huge saber. This battle general was 100 meters tall, and his face was exactly the same as Jiang Tian's. His body shone with bright light, like the sun in the sky. He stood ramrod straight on top of the azure dragon's head. His gaze was like lightning, looking down on the world with disdain. He was arrogant and indomitable, as if he could shake the sun and moon with a raise of his hand. He had a terrifying aura of one man holding back 10,000 men. There's more. This Kang Te Chu can't be killed. The 7th Saint Prince looked as if he had fucked all the monsters in the Mangu Mountain. He couldn't believe it. There are more divine powers. Many of the heavenly states' powerhouses exclaimed. Meiji and St. Jean's faces turned pale as if they had seen a ghost. The Golden Gung divine body was the only divine body that Jiang Tian had cultivated to greater mastery. Right now, it was only a step away from perfection. Once it was unleashed, how terrifying would its power be? It was far more powerful than the Xianshui Azure Dragon and the Whirling Divine Tree. Rumble. Gengjin Divine General suddenly rose into the air and flew to the top of the square. His long saber swept across the ground like mercury. The saber radiance was resplendent and spread out in the shape of a fan, covering a radius of several kilometers. Among them, 3 elders didn't even have time to let out a scream before they were sliced in half at the waist. Blood and organs rained down like rain. Clang! He stepped down, tearing apart the heavens, piercing through the clouds as he descended. An elder was directly stomped into a meat paste. His corpse exploded, erupting with countless resplendent flames of light. At this time, the other 8 elders were scared out of their wits. Chills ran down their spines. Holy light gushed out from the soles of their feet as they staggered back to the Templar Hall. Boom! Divine General Gengjin dragged his saber as he walked, covering 1,000 meters with each step. He punched out, annihilating the void. Clang! The 8 elders were startled. They immediately took out their protective Dharma artifacts. Holy light gushed out and formed hammers, giant shields and mountains, trying to block the punch. But it was useless. The punch swept across the sky, shaking the earth and destroying everything. Wherever the powerful fist passed, a layer of the square's ground, which was strong enough to withstand nuclear weapons, was shaved off. Cracks intertwined and formed a spider web. Fierce wind howled, blowing sand and pebbles. Bang, bang, bang. Muffled sounds rang out like thunder, and the holy light apparitions exploded one after another. The 8 elders revealed looks of horror and despair. Their bones and tendons were broken, and their bodies exploded at the same time. Fragments of their organs and broken bones flew everywhere. Whoosh, whoosh. Jiang Tian held Huang Linger's waist and slowly landed on the square like an immortal descending to the mortal world. The whirling divine tree behind him, the Xianshui Azure Dragon above his head and the Gengjin Divine General in front of him all shrank and disappeared into Jiang Tian's Dantian. 3 Dharma forms and infinite divine powers. That's terrifying. Yeah, he killed the ancient divine knights, broke the 4 ancient scrolls and killed the 12 elders in a flash. It's like an ancient legend. At this time, everyone was stunned and couldn't believe it. Jiang Tian's combat power was too terrifying. The Taichu true god is invincible. Overturn the sacred hall and stomp on the sacred king's head. This world belongs to the Taichu true god. Kill. At this time, the warriors of the giant race seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They roared and shouted loudly. They were deeply encouraged by Jiang Tian, their battle blood surging like a tide, their battle intent boiling, their morale soaring to the heavens. That's too powerful. Kang Taichu is really a god. Even the ancient true gods are nothing more than that. Lu Huaxi's eyes were full of admiration. He was so excited that his hands holding his weapon trembled slightly. Who knows, maybe the Taichu true god can really destroy the sacred hall this time. As his follower, what kind of reward will I get? He knew that Jiang Tian was very strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have joined Jiang Tian. However, at this moment, he felt that he had seriously underestimated Jiang Tian's strength. He only wanted a small tree, but now it seemed that Jiang Tian would very likely give him a forest. Maybe he really has the bloodline of the ancient gods. The human race on Earth can't be so powerful. Yi was deep in thought. He had a whole new level of respect for Jiang Tian. How is that possible? At this time, the 7 Saint Prince felt as if he had been killed by all the monsters in the Mangu Mountain. His heart was in pain and his heart was pounding. The elders are dead and the divine knights are dead. I'm afraid that there are not many people in the heavenly kingdom who can stop him. At this time, many of the saint princes and the lords of the sacred mountain were scared and looked at Jiang Tian in horror. In the history of the heavenly kingdom, there had never been a powerful existence like Jiang Tian who could dominate thousands of miles and suppress an entire world. Saint Jean's eyes were filled with disbelief. Her face was pale and full of shock. Once, Jiang Tian said that he would overturn the sacred hall and change the heavenly kingdom. However, she thought that Jiang Tian was just bragging. She didn't expect Jiang Tian to really do it. Is he really going to win? Mei Ji, the leader of the elf clan, was also in disbelief. She didn't want to surrender to the mortals on earth and didn't think highly of Jiang Tian. However, at this moment, she couldn't help but admire Jiang Tian's strength. On the platform, Jiang Tian looked neither sad nor happy. He glanced at the ashen-faced Saint King. In his previous life, Jiang Tian didn't know how many Light Saint clan members he had killed. The bloodline of the Light Saint clan members in the heavenly kingdom was no longer pure. Even if they condensed a light crystal, it was no challenge for Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian fed Huang Linger a pill to repair meridians. He pressed his palm on her dantian and injected a stream of true yuan to nourish her. Then, he used a few healing immortal arts to repair her broken meridians. I'm sorry, Jiang Tian. I didn't help you and became a burden to you. Huang Linger's face gradually returned to normal. She was touched and apologetic. What nonsense are you talking about? Jiang Tian smiled gently and touched her head. This made her heart beat faster and her pretty face blushed. Sure enough, there's something strange. The next moment, Jiang Tian took a deep look at the huge statue next to the square, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, Jiang Tian stepped into the air and walked with his hands behind his back as if he was taking a stroll in the park. He approached the Saint King step by step. At this moment, Jiang Tian had black hair, black eyes, and a jade-like complexion. He was handsome and otherworldly, like the most perfect work of art in the hands of the Creator. He was tall and slender, and every line of his body was filled with immortal charm. He also had the arrogance of an immortal cultivator. The monstrous aura he slowly exuded was no weaker than the Saint King's. Impossible. Impossible. You're just a filthy ant from Earth. How can you be so powerful? A look of panic finally appeared on the Sage Emperor's face as he staggered back several steps. At this moment, he could no longer maintain his original arrogance and calmness. How can you imagine what I'm capable of? Jiang Tian sneered disdainfully. The Light Saint clan members relied on their special physiques that could control light energy, far surpassing that of mortals. But they didn't know that they were still mortals. And Jiang Tian had already cultivated 3 divine physiques, each of which was the strongest in the universe. His real cultivation level was also at the golden core level, and the divine powers and secret arts he could use were even more earth-shattering. I don't believe that I, the Saint King, can't kill an ant from Earth like you. Kill. The Saint King's face turned red, then blue, and then purple. He suddenly jumped into the air and threw a punch. No matter what, he was the most powerful overlord in heavenly state. That punch was thrown. Endless holy light burst out from his dantian, surging like a tide and blazing to the extreme. In front of his chest, it turned into a sun that radiated light in all directions. It was as if it was material, and it spanned across the sky. It was enough to burn down mountains and scorch the earth, and it was like a comet shooting through the sky and smashing towards Jiang Tian. Clang! Jiang Tian flicked his finger. A Gungjin finger ray shot through the air, easily slicing through the sacred sun and then slamming into the Sage Emperor's chest without slowing down. The Saint King let out a cry and his body was instantly sent flying like a cannonball. He crashed through a dozen temples before he managed to stabilize himself. Jiang Taichu, I'll definitely kill you today and refine you until your body and soul are completely destroyed. The Saint King had never tasted such a defeat before. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Boom! Just as the Saint Emperor was about to struggle to his feet, Jiang Tian's foot pierced through the clouds and tore through the air, stepping on him. "Ha, you dare to make me submit to you and become your disciple? You have a rich imagination." Jiang Tian looked down and said calmly. He stepped on the Saint King's chest as if he were stepping on an ant that he could easily crush. Chapter 1049. Didn't you call yourself a true god? Aren't you powerful and domineering? Why can't you stand up and fight with me? Jiang Tian spat on the Divine Emperor's face, humiliating him to the extreme, almost angering the Divine Emperor to death. He commanded an entire world like an emperor. He had millions and millions of believers like a true god. He was unparalleled and superior. He had never been humiliated like this before. Kang Te-chu. I want you to die. The Divine Emperor's eyes widened as he struggled and roared. Heavenly World has always been the divine realm. I'm the Sacred Hall and the Master of Heavenly World. You're just an ant living on earth. Just wait for your divine soul to be destroyed. The Divine King was full of hatred. He roared like a beast and his voice echoed 10 miles away. Suddenly, beams of holy light poured into his body from the cross throne, the pillar of faith, and from all directions. The light crystal in his dantian shook violently and shot out thousands of beams of sacred light, crushing the dimension around him. Stop! However, Jiang Tian only snapped his fingers, and the holy lights suddenly stopped moving, not moving at all. That was a strange scene. They were like tentacles, arrows, flames, and streams of water. Originally, they were constantly changing, twisting, spinning, pulling, and devouring. But all of a sudden, they froze in the air, motionless, like modern abstract works of art. Are you trying to detonate your light crystal? Jiang Tian chuckled and said mockingly. Do you feel humiliated that you can't bear? Now, you've tasted the feeling of being stepped on and despised by others. Can't bear it anymore? The sacred race of light was originally space refugees living on Earth. The human race of the ancient Earth took you in, but you rebelled against the ancient Hua Xia and started a war between the East and the West. How shameless! Jiang Tian's eyes were as cold as ice as he looked down at the Divine King and sneered. You lost the war and the sky race took you in, but you repaid their kindness with ingratitude and stole their dimension. You're worse than animals. Jiang Tian's words hit the nail on the head. You are refugees, traitors, and plunderers. You have made no contributions to the civilization of mankind. You are truly vermin. However, it's laughable that you overestimate yourself, claiming to be a heavenly deity, calling yourself a divine Tao ancestor, high and mighty. You even coveted my foundation on earth, but you don't know the difference between you and ants in the eyes of a true powerhouse. After learning that Heavenly State and West Earth might have spirit chi revival seeds, Jiang Tian wanted to come and investigate. But at that time, Jiang Tian didn't want to start a war with them. Instead, he wanted to work with them to restore the spirit energy on Earth. However, the Holy See and the Brahmin took advantage of Jiang Tian's serious injury to invade Hua Xia, intending to annihilate Tianqing School. Using Tianqing School as a base to control the entire Earth world, this was something that Jiang Tian could not tolerate. At the end of the day, this conflict was caused by the arrogance of the Heavenly State and West Earth. They thought that they were immortals and true gods. They thought that they were powerful and were high and mighty, so they dared to look down on Earth. Jiang Tian was speaking the truth, but it was especially grating to the Saint Emperor. With every word Jiang Tian said, the Saint Emperor's anger intensified. By the time Jiang Tian finished, he was already burning with rage. Kang Te-chu. However, even though the Saint Emperor frantically activated the light crystal, the light flames were completely suppressed as soon as they reached his chest. Gradually, the light crystal couldn't even vibrate anymore. How can this be? The Saint Emperor's face was ashen. He couldn't believe it. In my domain, killing you is as easy as killing a chicken. Jiang Tian smiled contemptuously, his eyes filled with disdain. Jiang Tian was already able to use many peerless forbidden techniques. Previously, in the Stellar Sky domain, in front of the Jade Well Peak, he could already use forbidden techniques to stop tens of thousands of soldiers and everything within a few kilometers. However, at that time, it was still a little difficult for him to raise his hand to stop the golden core. After all, the golden core was an extremely terrifying energy crystal. If he used it, it would be like a nuclear explosion. Right now, he was using the newly activated, domain forbidden technique. Once he used it, he was the only one in the domain. He was like a true god, controlling everything and destroying everything. Kang Te-chu, let go of me. The Saint Emperor struggled with all his might. However, no matter what, he couldn't break free at all. A trace of despair gradually appeared in his eyes. He actually slowly retracted his light, and the light crystal calmed down as if it had given up resisting. What else do you have to say now? A mocking smile appeared on the corner of Jiang Tian's mouth. His eyes were as cold as ice. Kang Te-chu, I can give you the heavenly kingdom and the countless treasures that the Saint Hall has accumulated. I can also give up the position of Saint Emperor. I only hope that you can spare my life. The Saint Emperor, who was in a desperate situation, had completely surrendered. He lowered his head, smiled humbly, and wagged his tail. Do you think that I can't get these things if I kill you? Jiang Tian sneered, and the Soul Devourer burst out. A Soul Devourer as thick as an arm burst out from Jiang Tian's forehead, wrapped around the Saint Emperor's head, and entered his mind, searching for all his secrets. Kang Te-chu, what is this? You, let go of me. The Saint Emperor screamed, his body convulsing as he struggled in pain. This was an unbearable torture. The Soul Devourer was everywhere, searching for all his secrets and memories. His mind was in so much pain that it felt like it was going to explode. Is it painful? I have always been merciful. So, let's end this. After searching for all the information he needed, Jiang Tian withdrew the Soul Devourer, smiled, and stomped down. Bang! Bam! Jiang Tian's foot pierced through the Saint Emperor's chest, and then he put the blood-stained golden core into his storage ring. The Saint Emperor's divine soul and physical body were destroyed together, and his life force was severed. His face was still filled with shock and astonishment, as if he couldn't believe that Jiang Tian had killed him just like that. Countless people were speechless, their faces filled with disbelief. The Saint Emperor, the strongest expert who had dominated the heavenly country for countless years, died just like that. He was trampled under someone's foot like a bug. Jiang Tian's foot not only killed the Saint Emperor, but it also crushed the arrogance and domineering attitude of all the experts of the Sacred Hall. This battle is over. Many people were puzzled and in disbelief. This battle is over. Yi Ye's face was filled with admiration and respect as he looked at Jiang Tian's back like he was looking at a true god. We won. While the giants and the fallen angels were about to cheer, they suddenly realized that Jiang Tian wasn't done yet. Jiang Tian stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the edge of the square leisurely. He held the sacred hall in his arms and the 1,000-meter-tall statue of the sacred ancestor. I killed many of your descendants and destroyed your sacred hall and the holy see on earth. Why didn't you show up? A hint of mockery appeared on Jiang Tian's lips. Are you waiting for me to destroy the sacred hall and shoot down the artificial sun before you come back to life? Kang Te-chu is talking to the statue of the sacred ancestor. Everyone was shocked and confused. Could it be? Lu Huaxi and Yi Yi suddenly thought of a mysterious legend and their faces turned pale. There was extreme fear in their eyes as if they had seen a demon. In a blink, the entire place went silent. No one dared to make the slightest sound. They stared at the statue of the sacred ancestor without blinking. The stone statue was even taller than the sacred hall. The sacred hall was built by him and he held it in his arms. No one knew how long he had been there. He looked ancient and sacred, standing at the top of the world and looking down at everything. Even though everyone knew that this was just a lifeless statue, they still felt a strong sense of oppression. They couldn't help but want to kneel down and submit to it. In front of this mountain-like statue of the sacred ancestor, everyone felt as small as ants. Ah! His eyes are moving. Suddenly, Xiaoman screamed and her face turned pale. The statue's eyes are moving. It's real. Countless people exclaimed as if they had seen a ghost. At this moment, everyone could clearly see that his bucket-sized eyeballs had indeed moved. This was unbelievable. It was just a stone statue, but it moved. Was it going to come back to life? Sigh. The lips of the sacred ancestor's statue trembled as it let out a dry but clear sigh, distant and ancient. Is the sacred ancestor coming back to life? The sacred ancestor is coming back to life. The sacred hall has not failed. Sacred ancestor, avenge my father. Kill that demon Kang Te Chu. Hearing that sigh, countless powerful beings of the sacred hall, the owner of the sacred mountain, and the angels knelt on the ground. The seven saint prince cried and kowtowed to the statue of the sacred ancestor. The sacred ancestor has appeared. Saint Joan of Arc was trembling with excitement. She frantically kowtowed, causing blood to flow out of her smooth forehead. Fellow cultivator, you have 3 supreme divine bodies. In the future, you will definitely be able to form the nascent soul and even the Tao integration stage. You will be able to dominate a planet. This old man has been asleep for thousands of years. Why do you force me to appear? The lips of the giant statue moved, and the large pieces of stone on his face were sent flying in all directions. They smashed into the surrounding cliffs, and the cliffs cracked. It was a terrifying sight. The statue of the sacred ancestor, who had been awake for countless years, had come back to life. Chapter 1050. After the black stone of the divine ancestor fell off, the color of flesh and blood also appeared, as if a petrified god was about to wake up. Divine body. Nascent soul. What kind of level was that? Why had they never heard of it? Everyone was stunned, their faces filled with astonishment. Since you know about the nascent soul, void returning and Tao reunion cultivators, you must be an old monster from the ancient times. Jiang Tian sneered. Then you should know that what I want is to break the cage of this world and transcend this world. And your kingdom of heaven will be the stepping stone for me to jump out of this world. For the heavenly state, forming a light crystal and becoming a sacred emperor was the limit. As for what was above the sacred emperor, they knew nothing. But for Jiang Tian, who had lived for 10,000 years, the foundation establishment and golden core were just the starting points of cultivation. After that, there were the nascent soul, soul formation, void returning and Tao reunion cultivators. Each level was more powerful than the last. When he reached the top of the divine realm, he would be able to swallow the sun and shatter the galaxy. Then, he would be considered to have achieved something and look down on the universe. Ah, Tai Chu, the sacred emperor has already said that he has surrendered to you and countless heavenly treasures are at your disposal. I'm already too old. I just want to live a little longer quietly. The divine ancestor said. Jiang Tian said coldly, I want the spirit chi recovery seed. Jiang Tian had just searched the sacred emperor's memory. After all, he only had 1,000 years of life and knew a lot, but he didn't know anything about the spirit chi recovery seed. Jiang Tian thought that the spirit chi recovery seed should be in the hands of this divine ancestor. Ha, Kang Te Chu, you're too greedy. You destroyed my sect and hurt my followers, but I didn't care. I even gave you this world. Isn't that enough? The voice of the statue of the sacred ancestor suddenly turned cold, and was filled with rage. It sounded like divine thunder from the highest heavens. Not enough. Give me the spirit chi recovery seed, or I'll step on you and search your divine soul. Jiang Tian was resolute and decisive, pressing closer step by step. Good, good, good. I, Ancestor Saint Chi Liao, have presided over this world for countless years. You are the first one who dares to offend me. The rock on the divine ancestor's face fell off, revealing a face as smooth as jade. His eyes became colder and colder, and he said in a cold voice, "Originally, this ancestor didn't want to bicker with you because it wasn't easy for you to cultivate. But since it involves the revival seed, this ancestor has no choice but to take action." At that moment, Xiaoman realized something. When he spat out the name Saint Scorching, he was shocked. Her grandfather's body trembled violently, and his face was filled with horror. "Grandfather, what's wrong?" Yi Xiaoman asked curiously. She had never seen her grandfather so terrified before. "Qi Liao. Back then, there were 10 consecutive suns, and one of the true gods of the sun submitted to our ancestor. Later on, he gave birth to a son, and that son was named Qi Liao. Our ancestor, Ho Yi, was killed by him and his father." Yi Ye's face was pale, and his eyes were filled with shock, fear, and anger. "Qi Liao. Holy ancestor Qi Liao. The son of one of the sun true gods." Yi Xiaoman was first stunned, then her face changed drastically. To the various races in the heavenly kingdom, this name was like thunder. She had heard of it countless times since she was a child. That was because he was one of the founders of the sacred hall. No one knew how long he had lived, and how powerful he was. But wasn't there a rumor that he passed away 2,000 years ago? Yi Xiaoman was still asking in confusion. Boom! Thunderous booms rang out, causing the mountains to tremble and the earth to shake as the sacred ancestor rose to his feet. Countless large rocks fell on the temple and the square, forming huge craters and cracks. It was a shocking sight. At that moment, the divine ancestor had revealed his true appearance. His skin was like jade, and his eyes were like black crystals. He was wearing a black armor and a pair of boots. There were countless divine inscriptions on them, as if they were made from the deity realm. Boom! The entire first sacred mountain shook violently and sank 3 inches. It was as if 10,000 mountains had crashed down at the same time. On the first sacred mountain, countless overlords of the sacred light tribe knelt down and kowtowed. They were so emotional that tears streamed down their faces. "Kang Te-chu, you destroyed our orthodoxy and killed our sacred emperor. This time, the divine ancestor will tear you to pieces." There were also fanatical angels roaring at Jiang Tian. "The ancestral patriarch of the sacred hall is still alive. Please tear Kang Te-chu to pieces." Many overlords of the sacred hall shouted. "The divine ancestor Qi Liao has awakened. Kang Te-chu won't be able to defeat him." The 7 Saint Prince, Mei Ji, and Saint Joan of Arc were extremely certain, as if Jiang Tian was already a dead man. This was the divine ancestor, who had experienced the twilight of the gods and dominated the ancient earth like a true god. The patriarchs and the sacred emperors of the past were just his disciples. The holy knights were nothing more than his guards. As the divine ancestor walked forward step by step, the earth shook as if there was an earthquake. A terrifying energy fell like a river of stars, crushing the 10 sacred mountains and spreading for a few hundred miles. No one would be able to withstand such terrifying pressure. Huang Linger, Yi Yi, Lu Huaxi, and the others on the second sacred mountain had already turned pale. "Jiang Taichu, you interrupted this ancestor's slumber, forced me to appear, and ruined my cultivation. I will kill you until your soul is completely annihilated." The divine ancestor stood there 1,000 meters tall like a towering mountain. He looked at Jiang Tian as if he were looking at an ant. An earth-shattering energy pressed down on him like 10,000 mountains. In everyone's eyes, the 9 sacred mountains and the earth had disappeared, leaving only the divine ancestor's tall figure. Jiang Tian was like a sesame seed floating in front of a mountain. He was so small that he could be ignored. The divine ancestor's power was also at the nascent soul level. However, his Dharma power was indeed powerful, and he was even more powerful than Bai Zhe, who was at the same level. In fact, Bai Zhe had used a lot of his Dharma power to rebuild his body, and he hadn't recovered to his peak state. He would be at a disadvantage if he faced the divine ancestor. If a powerhouse like the divine ancestor were to descend to the mortal world, he would probably be able to sweep through all the major powers in the world within a few days. He would be able to fight against millions of mighty soldiers, sweep across the universe, and dominate the blue planet. He would stand at the peak of that world. Ha, you're not weak, silly big guy. Everyone was terrified and full of respect. However, Jiang Tian wasn't afraid at all. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "You're just a nascent soul cultivator. You're only in the nascent soul realm. You haven't even formed a true nascent soul yet. 1,000 years of life is already the peak of the nascent soul realm. But you've lived for so long." Jiang Tian's speculation was not without reason. It could even be said that it pointed to the crucial point. The divine ancestor was born in the ancient times and he had witnessed the formation of the Qiong dimension for tens of thousands of years. He wasn't like Bai Zhe, who was born many years after the formation of the heavenly star dimension. The divine ancestor might be tens of thousands of years old. However, even if he had a pure sacred light body, he wouldn't be able to live for so long. The divine ancestor's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Tian with a faint smile. "What price?" Jiang Tian touched his chin and said with a smile, "Normally, secret arts such as turtle breath, blood coagulation, and life will won't work. I don't see any tree of life sap, fortune pill, spirit fruit of resurrection, or any other life-prolonging elixirs." Jiang Tian glanced at the stones on the ground and said, "You used a secret art to petrify your body. You turned your body into stone and completely cut off your vitality, leaving only some of your divine soul to know the outside world. It's a good secret art, but it has a major drawback. When you first woke up, you were half dead and half petrified. Your power was only 1/3 of your peak state, or even lower." Jiang Tian had a mocking look in his eyes. He glanced at the angels kneeling around him and smiled. "If you want to recover your power, you'll need the flesh and blood of thousands of people. Do you really have the heart to kill your descendants?" Every word Jiang Tian said made the divine ancestor angrier. By the time he finished speaking, the divine ancestor's rage had already reached the heavens, and his killing intent was awe-inspiring. "Hm. I don't need the power of my peak state to kill you." The sacred ancestor's eyes blazed with holy light as he let out a furious harumph and took a step forward. Boom! As he stomped his foot, the huge square in front of the temple was filled with a gust of wind that swept across like a raging wave. The Saint Ancestor Mountain within 100 miles of it sank a few inches. Even the second sacred mountain was affected. Many elves, fallen angels, and giants with lower cultivation were completely shattered by the shockwaves and died. Countless people were frightened and stepped back. Huang Linger, who was surrounded by Jiang Tian's 7th metal true essence, also turned pale and sweat appeared on her forehead. Was this the power of a nascent soul formation cultivator? It was like a true god had descended to the world. No wonder they could cause disasters in the ancient times and were regarded as true gods by many human countries. "Die, you ant!" the divine ancestor roared. His giant hand covered the sky, and countless holy flames surrounded it as he grabbed at Jiang Tian. Even the ground of the square melted and countless buildings were set ablaze. Heaven and earth were scorching hot, as if lava was flowing through hell. At this moment, he was a fiend celestial, and Jiang Tian was like a speck of dust, unable to withstand a single blow. Jiang Tian's face froze slightly. Even though the divine ancestor had just woken up from his petrification, he was still a nascent soul formation cultivator. Moreover, he had a special constitution. He had a pure sacred light body, so he could cast many sacred arts at will. This was not something that Bai Zhe could compare to. "Kill!" Jiang Tian stepped into the air. Boom! The air trembled and the space under his feet twisted and shattered, turning into billowing airwaves that spread in all directions. His body turned into a beam of light, dodging the divine ancestor's giant hand and shot up into the sky like a rocket. During this process, Jiang Tian's divine body was activated and the energy on his body rose steadily. In an instant, he turned into the 7th metal divine body and was 100 meters tall. The 7th metal divine body had reached phenomenal success, so he could turn into a Dharma form and act alone or merge with Jiang Tian. At this time, Jiang Tian had merged with the seventh metal divine body and his body was shining with golden light. At the same time, his thunder eyes flashed and an extremely vast amount of purple lightning poured into the golden blade. The final battle of the heavenly state had finally begun. Chapter 1051. Purple Lightning Blade. The slash exploded the air within a few kilometers and half of the square turned into a sea of lightning. A purple crack appeared in the space. The magnificent purple saber light was like Pangu's giant axe cleaving open the chaos. It slashed open the heavens and the earth, and its might was even greater than before. The divine ancestor couldn't be subdued like Bai Zhe. That kind of 10,000-year-old monster was ambitious and cunning. It was difficult to control him even with a divine soul contract. Jiang Tian had to get rid of him once and for all. Jiang Tian would go to the ruins of deity in the future and explore the depths of the dimension. How could he allow others to sleep soundly beside his bed? Naturally, he could not leave this ticking time bomb behind and threaten Jiang Tian's foundation on Earth. Kang Te-chu, you said that I'm not at my peak state. Are you? The divine ancestor laughed and said with disdain, I know. This ancestor knows that you must be that reincarnated body, or you must have possessed it. You are like a phoenix reborn, or a withered tree sprouting new branches. But even if you are the reincarnated old devil and have rich experience, even if you started cultivating in your mother's womb, you will only have 30 years of cultivation. Moreover, Earth is too filthy. Without the nourishment of spiritual energy, how can you be this ancestor's opponent? At this time, Jiang Tian showed his divine body of gung metal. He was 100 meters tall, but he still looked small in front of the divine ancestor. You're too weak. The divine ancestor threw his head back and laughed. He looked at Jiang Tian's purple lightning blade that could split an aircraft carrier as if it was nothing. He reached out a finger and blocked Jiang Tian's purple lightning blade. Even though half of his body was surrounded by lightning bolts, he wasn't afraid at all. Whoosh! He flicked his finger and Jiang Tian was knocked a few thousand meters away, crashing into a mountain and collapsing it. Is this the power of the divine ancestor? Countless people exclaimed as if they had seen a god. They had seen how powerful Jiang Tian was. He had killed thousands of people and no one could stop him. And yet, he was knocked away by the divine ancestor with a flick of his finger. Ha! Not bad, sacred ancestor. Again. Jiang Tian rushed out from the sky full of stones. His battle intent surged and soared into the sky. His purple lightning eyes flashed and endless electric light poured into the golden long saber. Suddenly, the blade became even more dazzling. As Jiang Tian leaped up, it slashed down with the force of Mount Tai. Chi La. Before Jiang Tian's saber arrived, the violent purple lightning had already struck the divine ancestor's body and struck the ground. Suddenly, the crystallized ground melted and lava flowed out. There were also angels nearby. Even if they were at the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, they were still electrocuted into ashes and died. Could it be that even now, you still don't know the enormous gap between you and this ancestor? When the sacred ancestor saw this, a trace of regret flashed through his eyes. He was boiling with anger. With a cold shout, he placed his right hand behind his back and slapped the purple lightning blade. Immediately, Jiang Tian was sent flying. Rumble. Jiang Tian's body shot backward like an arrow. He crashed through two mountains before he could stabilize himself. Logically speaking, Jiang Tian's strength was at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. Coupled with the three powerful divine bodies and the many secret techniques he had accumulated in his previous life, he could kill all foundation establishment stage and even golden core stage cultivators. He wouldn't even be afraid of someone like Li Longyuan. However, the sacred ancestor's strength was indeed extraordinary. He had already surpassed the golden core stage and reached the nascent soul stage. He was only one step away from the nascent soul stage. Moreover, his sacred light body was second only to the divine body and the immortal body. It was much purer than the holy emperor. If it weren't for the fact that Qing'er and his daughter were in danger, with Jiang Tian's meticulous and steady character, he would never take such a risk. He would have broken through to the Gold Core realm and then come back to find trouble with him. However, Jiang Tian had no other choice. Jiang Tian's chest was shattered. Golden blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth and the purple lightning blade in his hand shattered. Jiang Tian. Huang Linger's heart sank. Her eyes were filled with pain and nervousness as she exclaimed. Jiang Tian's purple lightning blade was already invincible on Earth, not to mention that he had combined the gunmetal divine weapon and the purple lightning. He wouldn't even be afraid of nuclear weapons. However, it had been shattered by a palm strike, which showed how powerful the ancestral patriarch was. Cough, cough. Jiang Tian stood up shakily and coughed softly. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Whoosh! There was a hint of determination and fanaticism deep in his eyes. He waved his hands and another gunmetal divine sword appeared. He rose into the air again and rushed towards the sacred ancestor. Kill! Jiang Tian's fighting spirit was surging. The wind was raging and lightning was lingering in the sky. Cracks were everywhere and it seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Jiang Tian had gone mad from the slaughter. He attacked over and over again, and every single attack was fierce and formidable to the extreme, causing mountains and rivers to collapse and palaces to collapse. Even if a Golden Core realm expert was here, the expert would be unable to resist a single strike of his. However, the sacred ancestor was indeed powerful. He blocked Jiang Tian's attacks with his right hand, as if it were made of divine gold. Meanwhile, in everyone's eyes, there was nothing else in the world, only a golden light ball that was flying up and down, howling and singing. There was only that proud figure that was beaten down to the ground time and time again, but then flipped over and continued to fight. Kang Te-chu, are you still not going to surrender? You've exhausted my patience. Even though the sacred ancestor was able to suppress Jiang Tian, he was also extremely annoyed. The energy in his body was also being consumed rapidly. After all, he had just recovered and couldn't hold on for too long. You don't know what's good for you. When Jiang Tian attacked again, the sacred ancestor was completely enraged. His eyes were cold as he threw a punch. As he punched out, the boundless holy light within a radius of dozens of miles seemed to come alive as it surged towards his dantian and poured into his body. That area was actually as black as ink, as if it had been annihilated. Boom! The sky shook, the space shattered, and the sun and the moon were upside down. The power of that punch couldn't be described with words. Everyone only felt that there was nothing else in the world except for that punch. The fist, which was surrounded by sacred light, was like a sun in the sky. It shook the world and shocked everyone's minds. The fist was still very far away from everyone. However, everyone felt as if it had hit their hearts and their divine souls were about to pop out of their heads. Ah! Lu Huaxi exclaimed. He found himself standing still on the spot, and his vision was getting higher and higher. The scenery was changing rapidly. His divine soul had been shaken out of his body by the aftershock of the punch. And Jiang Tian. In the face of that punch, all of his divine powers and secret techniques were activated. The indestructible golden body, the Xianshui azure dragon, and the dancing divine tree were activated one after another. However, they were all shattered by the sacred ancestor's punch in an instant. In the end, the fist, which was surrounded by sacred light, landed on Jiang Tian's chest like a bullet train, sending him flying like a meteorite. Boom! Jiang Tiangeng's golden divine body was shattered inch by inch. He turned into golden light and dispersed, revealing his mortal body. He was instantly sent flying dozens of miles away, falling from the first sacred mountain to the second sacred mountain like a kite with a broken string. Jiang Tian. Huang Linger flew into the sky with tears in her eyes and hugged Jiang Tian. The situation in front of her made her heart pound. Jiang Tian's chest was a bloody mess. His ribs were broken inch by inch, and there were many deep dents. Jiang Tian's face was full of pain. His eyes were dilated and blood was flowing out of his mouth. Jiang Tian, wake up! Huang Linger yelled with tears in her eyes as she fed Jiang Tian 8 kinds of elixirs to prolong his life. At the same time, she put her palm on Jiang Tian's back and infused her true essence into him. She made a hand seal and cast many healing spells on Jiang Tian as if they were free. Crush, you ant! The divine ancestor's eyes were cold and cruel. He didn't want to let Jiang Tian off the hook. He leaped over a dozen miles, and his feet, which were wearing cold iron battle boots, pierced through the clouds like a tank and stomped on Jiang Tian. Before he even stepped on him, the violent pressure had already arrived. Below Jiang Tian, the ground within a few thousand meters of the second Saint Mountain trembled slightly, and a huge footprint was left in it. Jiang Tian and Huang Linger were rolling on the ground because of the violent airflow. Their bodies trembled as if they were about to fall apart. Open! Huang Linger's beautiful eyes were filled with tears, but she was fearless. She raised her brows and glared at the giant foot descending from the sky and shouted. Essence Qi burst out of her body and the energy of the spirit wood rose to the sky, turning into wooden swords and thorns and stabbing at the sacred ancestor's foot. At the same time, spiritual trees rose into the sky one after another. They were tens of meters tall and wanted to support the foot. Having reached the early stage of the foundation establishment level and having a wood spirit root, Huang Linger's combat power was comparable to that of the elite disciples of the immortal sacred grounds and famous sections. She could withstand the attacks of cannonballs and golden core cultivators. However, she was still far from the sacred ancestor. Kacha! Kacha! Explosive sounds rang out as countless wooden swords and thorns shattered. Under the violent pressure, the spiritual trees were reduced to powder like paper. They fluttered like snowflakes and fluttered like butterflies. Open! Huang Linger's body shook and she almost spurted out blood. She was already severely injured, but she still roared and released dozens of vines to entangle the sacred ancestor's foot. However, Huang Linger managed to hold on for a second or two, which gave Jiang Tian time to catch his breath. Open! Jiang Tian's pupils contracted as he was nourished by the wood healing art. His divine soul returned to its original position and he suddenly woke up. He roared and activated his 3 divine bodies at the same time. Kill! Divine General Gengjin's eyes were cold as he raised his saber towards the sky, slashing repeatedly with an indomitable will. Roar! The Xianshui azure dragon soared into the sky, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The whirling divine tree propped up the sky. One of its branches wrapped around Huang Linger and sent her dozens of kilometers away. Jiang Tian killed until he went crazy, he was like a demon and a god. This battle was destined to be recorded in the annals of history, shake both worlds, and stun the world. Chapter 1052. You're just an ant trying to shake a tree. How laughable. The divine ancestor sneered, his eyes full of mockery. Holy light gushed out from the giant foot, forming another giant foot that was more than 100 meters long. It was like a god's foot stepping on the air, and its power was increased tenfold. At his level of cultivation, he had already reached the realm of being able to control his body freely. Every move he made was a killing move. He was not like the other light sacred clan members who had to use vertical pupils, wings, or light sword techniques to attack. Crack! Boom! The light sacred foot stepped on the Gengjin divine general, the whirling divine tree, and the Xianshui green dragon. Under the unparalleled power, the 3 collapsed one by one. In the end, Jiang Tian was stomped into the ground, and the area within 100 meters sank by more than 30 meters. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, revealing a shocked and horrified expression. How powerful was Jiang Tian? He was able to push through several sacred mountains as if he was chopping vegetables. Even the elders and saint emperors could not stop him. But now, he could not even withstand a single blow from the divine ancestor. Especially Huang Ling, Yi Xiaoman, Mei Ji, and the other girls, they were shocked to the point their beautiful faces turned pale, and they were extremely anxious. "You're not dead yet. What a tough insect." The divine ancestor stood proudly on the second sacred mountain. He raised his foot and bent down, looking at Jiang Tian curiously. Boom! A beam of golden light broke through the rolling mountain rocks and soared 1,000 meters into the air. Jiang Tian appeared again. At this time, Jiang Tian was covered in blood. His internal organs were all damaged, and large pieces of his bones were broken. He was on the verge of collapsing. He could not even stand properly. He was severely injured. Fight! At this time, although Jiang Tian was severely injured, he was fearless. His fighting spirit was boiling like the sea. Even in the face of an expert who could suppress him, Jiang Tian's fighting spirit was still at its peak. In the cultivation world, the longer a cultivator's life was, the higher their cultivation was, and the more knowledgeable they were, but the more cowardly they were, and the more wretched their actions were. The more knowledgeable the cultivators were, the more they knew how terrifying and unpredictable this vast spacetime was. The universe was like a dark forest filled with wild beasts. In this dark forest, every cultivator was a hunter with a gun, but they were also weak prey. If a cultivator wanted to survive, they had to move stealthily through the forest like a ghost. Even their breathing had to be done carefully. Any life form that exposed their existence would be quickly destroyed. Without absolute strength, they would never expose themselves. Because of this, Jaya, who was only 2,000 years old, was very vigilant and fearful because he had seen too much power. The sacred ancestor was also terrified of death and the possibility of an invader. He had turned himself into a half-dead stone statue and would not easily expose himself. Logically speaking, Jiang Tian, who once had a lifespan of 10,000 years, should be even more terrified. That's right. In his previous life, even when he had reached the firmament, he had still been careful and meticulous in his planning. For every operation, he would often tremble with fear, as if he was treading on thin ice. He had to plan and deduce countless times. However, at this moment, Jiang Tian was not afraid at all. Because he had love in his heart. He loved Qing'er, his daughter, his family, Tianqing school, and the world. In this world, having countless fetters was the only way to live a meaningful life. A life without fetters was a pool of stagnant water. Fetters. They were Jiang Tian's weakest point, and also his strongest armor, the armor that made him fearless. For Qing'er, for his daughter, he was willing to give up his life. Without them, he would live like a dead tree in his previous life. Even if he could live forever, what was the point of that? Jiang Tian recalled that in his previous life, Jiang Tian had fought impulsively and recklessly several times. However, he felt that at that time, he also had the thought of seeking death, of destroying his own son and killing himself. In his previous life without Qing'er, living was so boring that it was worse than death. Do you still want to fight? The divine ancestor paced slowly with his hands behind his back. His eyes were cold, arrogant, and domineering. His voice was like a bell that shook heaven and earth. Kang Te-chu, you are no match for me. If you submit and sign a contract of light with me and become my slave, this ancestor will spare your life. Ha! Divine ancestor, you have underestimated me, Kang Te-chu. Do you think you can control my strength? Jiang Tian kept vomiting blood, but he was laughing maniacally. His piercingly cold killing intent, fiery fighting spirit, and unyielding fighting spirit made everyone's hearts jump. Alright, I've used up most of your qi and blood. I already know your Achilles heel. This time, I'll definitely destroy your divine soul. Rumble. Jiang Tian suddenly slapped the sky-devouring demonic gourd and took out the Sky Shaker Bow. Sky Shaker Bow. A hint of fear appeared on the divine ancestor's face when he saw that. This bow was used by the ancient Grand Cultivator, Ho-i. It had once shot through mountains and rivers and killed 8 of his ancestors. Even though countless years had passed, he still felt a chill down his spine when he saw the divine bow again. However, He quickly calmed down and smiled mockingly. This giant bow is indeed extraordinary. It is the Sky Shaker bow. However, for thousands of years, no one has been able to pull it open or wield it. He was very confident and his eyes were filled with mockery. That is because the ancient Grand Magus physique is gone. Kang Tae-chu, do you think you are so great just because you can dominate the world of Earth? You are wrong. You are too ignorant. Even if you have this bow, it is useless if you do not have the ability to wield it. At the same time, he took a big step forward, covering a distance of 10 miles with each step. He quickly approached Jiang Tian. Sigh, why did Immortal Master Jiang take out this giant bow? He can't wield it at all. Won't he be at the mercy of others? Seeing this, Yi Xiaoman exclaimed angrily and anxiously. In her opinion, Jiang Tian was wasting his time by taking out this giant bow. He would be killed easily. Seeing this, Lu Huaxi was also very anxious. Even Yi shook his head in disappointment. In such a dangerous battle, the slightest mistake could lead to a fatal disaster. Is that so? Standing in the air, Jiang Tian held the giant bow in his hand. Suddenly, he felt a connection with the giant bow. He poured his blood into the giant bow. Suddenly, the divine inscription started to shine. Dazzling flames soared into the sky, illuminating the area within a radius of 10 kilometers. At the same time, the Sky Shaker bow shrunk until it was 1/3 of its original size. At this moment, the giant bow seemed to be very compatible with Jiang Tian. It was as if it was specially made for Jiang Tian. What? He has awakened the giant bow. Yi Xiaoman's face was filled with disbelief. Her beautiful eyes were wide open. How did he do it? Lu Huaxi and Yi were also shocked. What? A Grand Magus body? A treasure body? No, a divine body. You've awakened the divine body with your divine blood. Seeing this, sacred ancestor Qi Huo was shocked. A hint of fear flashed in his eyes as he steadied himself. Then, a greedy and passionate look appeared on his cold face. He carefully approached Chen Fan and said coldly, Kid, I can't believe that a mortal like you has cultivated a divine body. As long as I turn my sacred body into a divine body, I will be immortal. The heavens are helping me. What he didn't know was that Jiang Tian had 3 supreme divine body secret techniques that were far more powerful than ordinary divine bodies. Even if he only had an ordinary divine body, he would be able to increase his lifespan by a few hundred years or even 1,000 years. He would then be able to break through to the nascent soul level or even the soul formation level. The sacred ancestor of light approached Chen Fan step by step like a fierce tiger about to catch a cunning fox. Are you going to hand over the techniques of building your body obediently, or do you want me to kill you, extract your soul, and torture you with true fire until you tell me all your secrets? The divine body forging technique was a top secret art in the universe. He guessed that Jiang Tian was the reincarnation of an old fiend, or even an alien race. In that case, other than this secret technique, there must be other shocking cultivation techniques. If the multidimensional worlds knew about it, there would be a great war to fight for those treasures. Old bastard, you're about to die and you still want my cultivation arts. If I were you, I would have run away. Jiang Tian laughed. He held the bowstring with 3 fingers and drew a semicircle in the air with his right elbow. He then pulled the bow into a full moon. Kang Tae-chu, you're too ignorant. This is the heaven-shaking bow, but you don't have the sun-shooting arrows. The sacred ancestor of light sneered. Then, he suddenly froze as if he had seen a ghost. Because he saw that the wind and clouds around Jiang Tian had changed color. Boom! There was a loud noise. The giant demon character above Jiang Tian's head, which was infused with the blood and cultivation of 10,000 people, turned into a straight red beam of light and hit the heaven-shaking bow. An arrow immediately formed on the heaven-shaking bow. This arrow was less than half a meter long. It was sparkling and translucent, and its entire body was blood red. It looked as if it was carved out of agate, magnificent and moving. However, it was full of killing intent. Chapter 1053. You can make the sun shooting arrow. Fear and greed appeared on the divine ancestor's face and his eyes became brighter. He felt that Jiang Tian was a treasure. Once he got his hands on him, he would benefit a lot. Of course, Jiang Tian was also very dangerous. Kang Te-chu, don't you know that you're in trouble because of your wealth? If you don't surrender, you'll be throwing an egg at a rock. I won't let you go today. He formed a profound and obscure hand seal, and within his dantian, a bright light erupted and emitted an enormous rumbling sound that was like rolling thunder, shaking people to the point of intense pain in their eardrums and causing them to feel dizzy. Those with lower levels of cultivation vomited blood and died. An extremely bright light came out of his body. That was the explosion of his golden core. The bright sacred light was enough to level mountains and crush the earth. Every ray of it could kill a Foundation establishment overlord. The boundless holy light eventually turned into a dazzling sword that resembled an intercontinental missile in front of his chest. He flicked his finger at the back of the sword hilt, and the light sword erupted like a sun, pushing toward Jiang Tianheng. Forming a nascent soul was between the perfected golden core and the nascent soul. It was sometimes called a fake nascent soul. His golden core was extremely condensed and was much more powerful than that of normal cultivators. The true essence inside was as heavy as a mountain and as vast as the ocean. It was inexhaustible and could kill a golden core cultivator as easily as killing a chicken. Besides, Jiang Tian hadn't reached the golden core level yet. Qi Liao, you're lucky to have seen this arrow. You deserve to die. Jiang Tian said calmly. Suddenly, his fingers loosened, and the bowstring bounced back at high speed, brushing past his fingertips. The shooting sun arrow condensed by his blood essence suddenly disappeared. In a flash, a gust of wind came out of the bowstring and swept across 10 kilometers. The sound of the bowstring was like a dragon's roar. No one saw how the shooting sun arrow had been fired. They only saw a white spatial turbulence appear 100 meters away from Holy Ancestor Qi Liao's chest. The Divine Ancestor's eyes were filled with fear and astonishment. He could feel that familiar aura. Even though it had been here for a long time, it was still filled with killing intent and chilliness that made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This arrow was formed from the blood essence and cultivation of 10,000 experts. It was incomparably sharp. The sky-shaking bow was originally an ancient treasure of the sky race. Its origin was extraordinary. When the arrow was shot, the entire space seemed to freeze. Time seemed to stop, and even the wind seemed to stop. Everything became incomparably slow. Because it was too fast. When the arrowheads came into contact with the light crystal sword, the light sword shattered in an instant. The fragments shot out in all directions and turned into rolling air currents that spread out in all directions. Wherever they passed, the tall mountains collapsed and the earth trembled. At this moment, the 10 holy mountains were shaking together, and even the entire kingdom of heaven was shaking as if it was going to collapse. What's that? Is the world going to be destroyed? In the cities, on the mountains, and in the world, countless holy clans of light and countless mortals were awakened. They looked in the direction of the Saint Ancestor Mountain in shock and fear. Puchi. The sacred ancestor looked down at his chest in shock, and his eyes were filled with grief and despair. He saw a huge hole in his dantian. Through this hole, he could see the desperate and fearful faces of some of the angels behind him. Jiang Tian's arrow had pierced through the sacred ancestor's burning dantian. It was as if the arrow was in Jiang Tian's hand a moment ago, and the next moment, it was in front of the sacred ancestor's chest. This shooting sun arrow seemed to have transcended time and space. It ignored distance and all obstacles. The dazzling arrow pierced through the sacred ancestor's dantian, and extremely exaggerated blood splattered everywhere. The bloody flower brandished its claws, sparkling and translucent. Radiance pervaded the air, making it appear colorful and beautiful. Then, the shooting sun arrow continued to fly upward and shot into the first holy mountain 100 kilometers away. There was a loud rumble. The first holy mountain collapsed, and the mountain rocks rolled down like a torrent. The sound was like rolling thunder. In an instant, countless angels and experts were killed. Jiang Tian had used a secret magic to condense this arrow with the curse power of the killing command, as well as the blood essence and cultivation bases of 10,000 powerful experts. This arrow was at least equivalent to the combined attack of thousands of Foundation establishment cultivators. This arrow was able to kill a peak-stage golden core cultivator and severely injure a nascent soul cultivator. This is too fast. Kang Te-Chu can actually draw the ancient divine bow. This is unbelievable. In history, the Giants and the Templars fought for this bow. Countless grand cultivators obtained it, but no one has ever drawn it. That's right. I heard that even the sacred emperors can't do it. Could it be that he is the real god? Countless people exclaimed. Even Yi Yi and Lu Huaxi's faces were full of disbelief. They were so excited that their hands trembled. The Taichu true god is invincible. The young giants roared loudly, cheering for Jiang Tian. It turns out that he has the ability to refine the evil hunting order. Mickey murmured to herself. St. Joan's face was pale. The seventh Saint Prince trembled as if his parents had died. He whispered to his followers behind him to prepare a flying Dharma artifact so that they could escape at any time. At this moment, the originally clear sky instantly turned gloomy. A wisp of dark clouds covered the artificial sun. There was even a shadow on the sun, making it look dim. Looking up at the dark sky, the sacred ancestor curled his lips and forced a smile. It was a heart-wrenching smile. It was unknown how long he had been through. He had once dominated the ancient earth, suppressed the ancient countries, and many civilizations. He had even joined forces with his father and brother to kill the ancient Huaxia almighty Hou-Yi, occupying this part of the world. Later, due to the limited resources, he stopped at the nascent soul level. In order to survive and obtain opportunities, he had to use a secret art to petrify himself and turn into a half-human, half-stone monster with the nourishment of the spirit Qi seed. All of this was for the Grand Tao, to obtain eternal life, to transcend this world and become immortal. But on the first day of his recovery, his dantian was pierced by Jiang Tian and he lost half of his power and lifespan. Anger and indignation gradually rose in his eyes, as if he were going to burn the sky. Kang Te-Chu, you can't kill me. Following an earth-shattering roar. Boom! He stomped his feet on the ground and flew toward the first sacred mountain. His hands formed a series of hand seals, and his lips moved quickly as he chanted an incantation that was difficult to pronounce, but loud and clear. As he cast a secret art, the giant cross in front of the light-sacred temple suddenly emitted endless sacred light like a lighthouse, forming a beam of light that penetrated the world and struck the sacred ancestor. In the blink of an eye, the countless crosses of all sizes in the heavenly kingdom began to glow brightly as they headed toward Mount Sage Ancestor. The sacred ancestor of the light sacred ancestor used light and faith to nourish his body. Faith was his food and also his healing medicine. In an instant, he devoured the power of faith that countless crosses had gathered over the past 10,000 years. His damaged dantian and wounds were immediately repaired and he even formed a new golden core. However, his body had shrunk to 100 meters tall. Apparently, his combat power had suddenly decreased. You want to use the power of faith to heal your body? Unfortunately, you don't have the chance anymore. Jiang Tian's handsome face showed a hint of mockery and the bow was like a full moon. The artificial sun in the sky shot down a beam of light that was as thick as a bucket, enveloping Jiang Tian and the giant bow. The giant bow absorbed the beam of light and the artificial sun in the sky dimmed for a moment. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling golden arrow was formed on the giant bow. Jiang Tian's eyes were cold and ruthless as he shot the second arrow. The crowd still couldn't see the shooting sun arrow, but they saw the divine ancestor's body tremble violently and let out a mournful howl. Then, like a huge leaf fluttering in the wind, he was sent flying. Clang! The shooting sun arrow shone brightly and pierced the sacred ancestor's newly formed dantian. This time, except for the explosion in his chest, the upper body of sacred ancestor Qi Liao cracked inch by inch. Even his beautiful jade-like face had many shocking cracks, which were crawling and interweaving like earthworms. Kang Te Chu, you can draw the heaven-shaking bow twice. Where are you from? Sacred ancestor Qi Liao shouted in panic and desperation. His face was full of fear and disbelief. Even in the ancient times, when golden core cultivators and nascent soul cultivators were everywhere, nobody could draw the heaven-shaking bow twice in a row. However, Jiang Tian had done it. He couldn't believe it. Sacred ancestor Qi Liao had only heard that there were people in the great sects at the center of the universe who could draw the heaven-shaking bow twice in a row. However, that was only a legend. Nobody had seen it with their own eyes. He didn't expect to see it in person today, and he also didn't expect that the person who was shot was himself. Chapter 1054. Boom! Sacred ancestor Qi Liao's eyes were filled with unwillingness as he made a hand seal. Instantly, the angels and the holy clan of light collapsed as they screamed in agony. They turned into rivers of blood mixed with light and poured into his body. These were all his descendants. However, at this moment, he did not care about anything else in order to survive. In an instant, he absorbed the blood essence, light, and cultivation of thousands of descendants, forcibly forming a physical body and recovering his cultivation. Jiang Tian did not answer. His eyes were cold and emotionless. He pulled the bow to the fullest again, and a holy light arrow as powerful as the one before condensed on it. Kang Te Chu. Why don't we shake hands and make peace? I'll be your servant and watch over this world for you. I can also give you the spiritual chi seeds. I won't leave any of them alive. Sacred ancestor Qi Liao waved his hands in front of his chest with a hint of pleading in his eyes. Under Jiang Tian's terrifying shooting sun arrows, he had no power to resist at all. If there were another 2 arrows, he would definitely die. Ha, you're not that stupid. I'll only be at ease if you die. Take another arrow from me. Go to hell. Jiang Tian was not going to let him go. He shot a 3rd arrow without hesitation. Jiang Tian had a hard time shooting this arrow. The consumption of blood essence, cultivation base, and lifespan by using this bow was terrifying. Even a nascent soul cultivator might not be 100% confident in pulling it apart. Jiang Tian was only a foundation establishment cultivator at the moment. If he did not have 3 powerful divine bodies, he would not be able to control it. When the bowstring was fully drawn, strands of gray gradually appeared on his hair, and his skin quickly withered. However, Jiang Tian did not care at all. He still shot an arrow. Ah! Sacred ancestor Qi Liao screamed in pain as he was shot again. Large blobs of blood bloomed in the air, and he almost completely shattered. When his body was formed again, he was already the size of an ordinary person. He was as thin as firewood, and his hair was withered. He was hunched over like an ordinary old man who was about to die. Coupled with the fact that his chest was stained with blood, his armor was shattered, and his clothes were in rags. So, where was the strict and imposing aura from before? Kang Te Chu, you forced me to do this. Let's perish together. Facing the threat of death, sacred ancestor Qi Liao was enraged. The light crystals in his body were all ignited, turning into a blazing light that pierced through heaven and earth, shooting toward the artificial sun. At the same time, he cast a secret technique and chanted an incantation. Suddenly, the artificial sun seemed to have been detonated and let out a loud bang. The boundless light transformed into a blazing pillar of light, sweeping towards Jiang Tian. This is, Yi was shocked as he recalled a terrifying legend. It was said that in the past, there was a sky race that had a round sky and a round earth. They had an artificial sky with a starry sky pattern that simulated the heavens and revolved endlessly. However, the 9 radiant race cultivators had invaded. They had activated a huge radiant ritual implement, and it was as if 10 suns had connected. Hou shot and killed 8 of them, but he didn't kill Chiliu's father. The artificial sun might have been the radiant ritual implement they had used back then. Hou-Yi had modified it into a Dharma artifact and refined it into a starry sky pattern. Once sacred ancestor Qi Liao activated it, it could kill billions of people and destroy a world. Ha! I was going to get this sun anyway. So, I'll get it in advance. Jiang Tian smiled and pulled the bow to the fullest again. However, this time, there were no radiant arrows on the bowstring. While everyone was puzzled. Suddenly, a giant golden figure appeared behind Jiang Tian. That figure was so tall that it was at least 1,000 feet tall. It was wearing a high hat and a wide belt. 12 crowns hung down, and its sleeves were fluttering in the wind. Inside, there was a suit of armor. It was both intelligent and brave. His eyes shot out like lightning as he stood behind Jiang Tian. He was even taller than the first sacred mountain, as if he were going to support the world. It was a shocking scene. He picked up the stars and the moon, held the sun in his hand and stepped on the endless river of time. When he raised his hand, the world would change. When he moved, mountains and rivers would change. When he took a step, he would break an era. Suddenly, an extremely old and majestic aura spread out. He was like a divine arch who ruled over everything in the universe, suppressing the entire world of heavenly state. It was divine the Archgenjin from the desolate age of the universe. The Genjin divine body started out as an indestructible golden body Dharma form. When it reached its peak, it could evolve into divine the Archgenjin. This is the last arrow. I'll shoot you and the artificial sun together. Jiang Tian grinned crazily and shot out an invisible arrow with a flick of his finger. Behind him, Divine the Archgenjin also pulled the bow to the fullest and the arrow shot out like a shooting star. The sharpness of the arrow couldn't be described with words. It seemed to have transcended time and space and could suppress everything. It was the divine power and secret art of Divine the Archgenjin, the Xinghe arrow. When the arrow was shot, divine ancestor Qiliao turned into a beam of golden light and shot towards the artificial sun. He was so fast that he couldn't be seen with the naked eye. 100 kilometers was just a flick of his finger. As long as he got into the artificial sun, he would be bathed in endless sacred light to repair his body and even use this treasure to kill Jiang Tian. Meanwhile, he was getting closer and closer to the artificial sun. He was only a kilometer away. Bathed in the endless sacred light, the broken parts of the divine ancestor's body were quickly repaired. His body became taller and his face became younger again. His energy didn't decrease but increased and he immediately reached his peak state. But then, he suddenly stopped. Boom! The projection of the primordial seventh metal god emperor behind Jiang Tian had already collapsed and turned into golden seventh metal true essence that drilled into Jiang Tian's body. At this moment, Jiang Tian's figure was on the verge of collapse as he ceaselessly coughed up blood, and his countenance was pale like a sheet of paper, yet he started laughing loudly in delight. It's going to explode. Divine ancestor Qiliao was terrified. He wanted to retreat, but it was too late. Boom! The artificial sun exploded, as if 100 nuclear weapons had exploded at the same time. In the sky, an incomparably huge flame flower bloomed, burning the void within a radius of 100 miles. It was so piercing that it made people tear up. Countless palaces and mountains on the first sacred mountain immediately turned into lava and the angels and divine knights were vaporized. In a blink, a giant hole was torn open in the sky, revealing the deep space outside. But in a blink, it returned to normal. The endless light of the artificial sun was out of control. It was no longer sacred light, but the true fire of the sun's sacred ancestor Qiliao, who was only 1 kilometer away from the explosion, melted his armor, which could withstand multiple nuclear weapons. His body, which seemed to be made of precious gold, cracked and melted into a liquid as if it were made of wax, which flowed down. In the end, with an unwilling roar, his body and soul were melted by the endless light and turned into steam, completely vanishing from this world. Jiang Tian's arrow had destroyed the sun and killed a nascent soul cultivator. Countless people in Heavenly Kingdom looked up in shock and trembled. They saw the man in ragged clothes covered in blood in the sky. He was like a thin leaf in the wind, about to fall. He covered his mouth with his fist and kept coughing up blood. Although his back was in such a sorry state, at this moment, in this world, there was nothing else in the eyes of the crowd. There was only him. In everyone's eyes, he was like an invincible fiend god, crushing everything and standing in the sky. Then, in front of countless people's shocked gazes, the artificial sun broke away from the star Atlas in the sky and crashed into the first holy mountain with the broken pieces of fire, burning half of the first holy mountain into lava. The sky suddenly dimmed and the sun and the moon were upside down. The eternal day turned into a cold night. Boom! The earth trembled, and the 10 Saint Mountains shook violently, collapsing unceasingly. Rolling boulders surged down like a torrential flood. Even all the cities and mountains in Heavenly Kingdom were shaking violently, as if they were going to rush out of the folded space and appear in the universe. At that moment, countless people in Heavenly Kingdom were terrified and their souls were about to leave their bodies. They were extremely shocked, as if they had seen a ghost. At that moment, the sun fell and the stars dimmed. The world lost its color and the rivers and mountains shook. Jiang Tian was the only one left in this world. He stood in the sky with a giant bow in his hand, illuminating the world like the sun god. Chapter 1055. Swish, swish, swish. Huang Linger flew in the air and helped Jiang Tian land on the second sacred mountain. She fed him a healing pill and cast a few Dharma arts on Jiang Tian's wounds. The entire Heavenly Kingdom was in dead silence. All the overlords watching the battle were silent and couldn't make even the slightest sound. They stood there motionlessly like statues. He only saw the 10-kilometer-wide artificial sun on the first sacred mountain that was gradually dimming and collapsing. He saw the first sacred mountain in a mess. They immediately understood what all this meant. Their divine ancestor had awakened, suppressed a world and activated the artificial sun, but he was still killed by Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian even simulated the will of the divine Arch and shot the sun with an arrow. This meant that Jiang Tian was already the most powerful being in this world. Who would dare to offend him? Phew! Jiang Tian slowly let out a mouthful of turbid air as he performed a secret technique. Immediately, his wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. His qi and blood also rose steadily. Right then, Jiang Tian already had 3 constitutions: azure wood, aged metal, and black water. He could absorb many elements around him and turn them into true essence. Besides, his dantian had formed a world of its own and the 3 constitutions could transform with each other. His absorption speed was also much faster than normal people. Even though Jiang Tian forcefully summoned the ancient aged metal divine the Arch and Jiang Tian forcefully pulled the sky-shaking bow, his true essence, divine will, life and blood qi had reached an unbelievable level. However, Jiang Tian was still recovering with difficulty. Right then, the masters of the sacred mountain, the Knights of Light and the elders who had fled far away were struggling and hesitating. Right then, Jiang Tian's power had dropped to the first level of the foundation establishment level. This was their last and only chance. If Jiang Tian recovered for a while longer, they wouldn't have a chance to kill Jiang Tian anymore. They could only be suppressed by Jiang Tian. Do you want to attack the Taichu true god? You'll have to go through the giants first. Yi spurred his mount and soared into the sky. He led his clansmen and charged towards the remnants of the sacred hall, roaring loudly. We are the Tao protectors of the true God of absolute beginning. Whoever dares to invade will be killed without mercy. Whoever dares to take a step forward, we will trample on their sacred mountain and exterminate them completely. Come up, come up. I've been wanting to fight with you for a long time. Today, I'll take this opportunity to learn a thing or two from you. The giants were all very ferocious as they rushed over from all directions. Their battle intent was boiling like a tide, and their morale was high. They rushed into the heavens, wearing beast skin clothes, riding giant beasts, waving their weapons as they shouted. They regarded Jiang Tian as their savior and the hope of their tribe's revival. At this moment, they were willing to fight to the death to protect Jiang Tian. They surrounded Jiang Tian like an iron bucket. The fallen angels also rushed over and blocked the remaining Templar army like a human wall. Lu Huaxi's gray pupils turned, and he suddenly swung the Grim Reaper scythe. He released a terrifying aura and chuckled, "Sacred Masters, why don't you come over and kowtow to the new King of Heaven, the true God of absolute beginning? Slow down. If you don't show enough sincerity, don't blame my scythe for being ruthless." After hearing that, the Sacred Masters immediately reacted, as if they had just woken up from a dream. A ray of sacred light came from afar and appeared in front of Jiang Tian. It bowed deeply and said respectfully, "Thank you." He bowed respectfully and said, "The Master of the Third Sacred Mountain greets the true God of absolute beginning." This Sacred Master was the one who had accompanied the Seven Saint Prince to deliver the letter of challenge to Jiang Tian. He had already formed light crystals and had the strength of a fake core cultivator. And yet, he knelt in front of Jiang Tian right then, as if he were a subject meeting a superior emperor. Both Jiang Tian and sacred ancestor Qi Liao were too far away from becoming true gods. But right then, Jiang Tian had destroyed the sun and attacked the sacred ancestor. The power he displayed made him feel like a true god. "All right." Jiang Tian nodded. "From now on, the third sacred mountain will serve the true god of the Taichu sect. I'm willing to serve you for the rest of my life." He turned his head slightly and scanned the surroundings with a stern and cold gaze. He said in a cold voice, "I'm now protecting the true god of the Taichu sect. If anyone dares to oppose me, they'll have to go through me first." The other holy lords, knights, and managers of the angel division were all at the foundation establishment stage and even the pseudo-core stage. They all rushed over and kowtowed to Lin Ming. The army was defeated. At this point, a dozen overlords had already surrendered. Even if the rest of them wanted to resist, they couldn't do it alone. They realized that the situation was hopeless, so they also came over to greet him. At this moment, Lu Huaxi was smug. No matter whether they were willing or not, they had to surrender. From that day on, Heavenly Kingdom would welcome a new master and all the previous overlords would be swept away into the dust of history. On the other hand, Huang Linger, who was supporting Jiang Tian, felt both heartache and joy. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears as she muttered with a choked voice, "Jiang Tian, you won, you finally won. That's great. He's really completed the earth-shattering task of conquering Heavenly Kingdom and dominating the Sacred Hall." At this time, Saint Joan of Arc, with a slender and graceful figure and a beautiful and holy face, stood there in a daze, unable to believe it. The scenes of him getting to know Jiang Tian flashed through his mind like a merry-go-round. Before every battle with Jiang Tian, she thought that Jiang Tian had no chance of winning, but Jiang Tian always turned the tide and created miracles. However, she was too superstitious about the power of the Sacred Hall. In her mind, the Sacred Ancestor and the Sacred Emperor were as unshakable as mountains. In the end, she still stood on the opposite side of Jiang Tian. But at this time, when Jiang Tian overturned the Sacred Hall, killed the Sacred Ancestor and Sacred Emperor, and dominated a world, she regretted it and realized how stupid her choice was. At this time, she was trembling and her face was as pale as paper. She was so scared that she almost peed on the spot. She followed the crowd to Jiang Tian and kowtowed and apologized. "You have no chance to worship the true god of Taichu. You are a traitor. Blasphemer." After receiving Jiang Tian's look, Lu Huaxi swung his sickle and cut off the woman's head without hesitation. Blood splattered. St. Joan's face was still full of shock and regret before she died, as if she couldn't accept that she had died like this. The beautiful woman in the crowd was splashed with blood. She was so scared that she trembled and kowtowed even more happily. However, she had mixed feelings in her heart. Originally, she had been in contact with Jiang Tian and had the opportunity to stand on Jiang Tian's side. At that time, the fallen angels had even invited her to overthrow the Sacred Hall together. However, she doubted Jiang Tian's strength and refused. If she chose to fight side by side with Jiang Tian, not only would her status rise in the future, but also the entire elf race would benefit greatly. He won. He killed the sacred ancestor Qiliao with the heaven-shaking bow and destroyed the sun. Is he really a true god, an ancient god? Yi Xiaoman looked at Jiang Tian in a new light. It was as if she had met Jiang Tian for the first time. At the same time, her beautiful face flushed red and turned pale, and she felt extremely ashamed, guilty, and dejected because of her disrespect and contempt towards Jiang Tian. At this time, she realized that Jiang Tian was too powerful. It was not something she could imagine at all. She was like an ant that couldn't estimate the height of a mountain. Her vision was too limited. True God Tai Chu, the sacred hall and the second sacred mountain have been destroyed in the battle. Please go to the third sacred mountain to rest for a while. The third sacred master invited him with a fawning expression. Jiang Tian had not recovered from his injuries and needed to rest for a few days. He agreed readily and nodded. At the side, Lu Huaxi's gray eyes flashed with a hint of jealousy. He cursed in his heart. This guy is so good at flattery. He stole my lead and even called himself a protector. How shameless. Jiang Tian walked towards the palace of the third sacred mountain and said calmly, Lu Huaxi, Yi, you two protect me. Yes. Lu Huaxi hurriedly followed him. He was overjoyed and happy. Master still hasn't forgotten me. Chapter 1056. Kang Te Chu, the devil of earth, had won. This news was like a nuclear explosion, instantly shaking the entire kingdom of heaven. It had only been 2 days since Jiang Tian came to kingdom of heaven, overturned the holy church, killed the divine ancestor, and became the ruler of this world. But such earth-shattering changes had occurred. Who could remain calm? In the eyes of the residents of kingdom of heaven, Jiang Tian would either be killed immediately or be trapped in a protracted war and be forced to flee pathetically. But they did not expect such an ending. Especially the last battle at the Shengzu mountain. The divine ancestor woke up, and holy light filled the sky and shook the world. Jiang Tian appeared as the ancient divine emperor Gengjin, and shot an arrow that caused the artificial sun to explode and fall. The terrifying waves of energy swept across the 10 holy mountains and shook half of kingdom of heaven. Countless people could feel the terrible lethality. The ancient divine night has fallen. The 12 elders have died in battle. The divine emperor was trampled to death. The divine ancestor woke up from the statue, but he was killed by Kang Te Chu with an arrow. The artificial sun has exploded, and the eternal night has descended. Every piece of news was like a heavy hammer that bombarded people's hearts, making it difficult for them to breathe. Regardless of whether it was the harmless elves, the domineering demonic beasts, or the city lords and nobles in the mortal cities, all of them were shocked to the extreme. How can this be? A mortal ant from the earth world is superior to our holy clan of light. Some of the die-hard followers of the holy church felt as if their parents had died. They could not accept this, and tears streamed down their faces as they gritted their teeth. Are you not convinced? Why don't you go and kill him? Jiang Taichu lives on the second sacred mountain. Someone mocked the die-hard followers. The former immediately shut up and looked as if he had eaten shit. Provoking Jiang Tian. What a joke. Not to mention that Jiang Tian's strength had already crushed the divine ancestor. Those powerhouses who had submitted to Jiang Tian were not people that they could deal with. Although the masters of the holy mountains and many experts wanted to meet Jiang Tian, or hold some sort of coronation ceremony, Jiang Tian refused and planned to enter seclusion. At this moment, many sacred lords and city lords had already handed over their heavenly materials and earthly treasures and worshipped him, calling him the grand beginning god. Jiang Tian, have you really become a god? Huang Linger asked curiously. God? How am I a god? Jiang Tian smiled and said, a divine-level civilization is even more powerful than an immortal cultivation civilization. It's already between a life form, eternal consciousness, and the laws of heaven and earth. It's immortal and indestructible, and it can create and destroy all things. They all called the sage ancestor Sage Emperor a true god. Huang Linger still felt that Jiang Tian was a god now, and her heart was filled with endless love and worship. Ha! Have you read the canon of the Holy See? How could you be bewitched by the Holy See? Jiang Tian looked up to the sky and laughed. Now, the so-called gods in many myths and legends, including the Holy See, aren't real gods. Calling them demigods and fake gods is just a way to elevate them. It's just a way to bewitch people. Saint Adam was called the ancestor of mankind, but in fact, he didn't create mankind. The holy race of light was actually a large race, but countless miracles that the holy race of light had performed on earth were recorded in the Book of Merit of the true God worshipped by the Holy See. In fact, he didn't exist at all. He was just a fictional object of worship. The Holy See said that their true God created the world and gave it light. But even the sage ancestor was thousands of miles away from the Hongmeng God who could create the world. From Jiang Tian's point of view, many of the gods with titles in the world were not true gods. They were just powerful creatures with supernatural powers. Some were even demonic beasts. Huang Linger nodded. At this time, in front of Jiang Tian, crystals as tall as mountains, herbs as tall as a man, spirit pills and spirit stones were piled up in the huge room. Especially those crystals of light, which were the secret treasures of the Holy Church. They were formed by extracting sunlight and starlight with a secret technique. They were as dazzling as diamonds and contained endless light energy. The true fire of the sun was flowing inside. If a 1-inch crystal of light was taken out and exploded, it could kill a foundation establishment overlord and seriously injure a golden core cultivator. These treasures were all given to Jiang Tian by the various sacred mountains in order to curry favor with him and help him heal his injuries. Jiang Tian was fierce and killed them until their souls left their bodies. At this time, they were taking out their coffin money just to save their lives. In addition, there were 3 spirit chi recovery seeds floating in the air. These seeds were crystal clear and had an ancient and vast energy. Dense spirit chi spread like mist. Even the priceless treasure medicines in the cultivation world couldn't compare to them, they were comparable to the recovery seeds in the stellar sky domain. After all, these 3 seeds were formed by many ancient grand cultivators during the age of the deities to compete with Star Destroyer for the spirit chi of ancient earth. Its spirit chi was immeasurable. These 3 seeds were very precious to the divine ancestor. He had been storing them in his dantian and nourishing them with his light bloodline. He only took them out after Jiang Tian killed them. He was probably waiting for an opportunity to obtain some divine body cultivation arts and absorb the recovery seeds to rebuild his body. Unexpectedly, he was killed by Jiang Tian and burned to ashes by the true fire of the sun as soon as he was reborn. Although these seeds were very helpful for Jiang Tian's recovery and cultivation, Jiang Tian didn't want to use them. He wanted to leave them for Qing'er and his daughter. He carefully put the 3 seeds into the sky-devouring demonic gourd and engraved many divine soul restriction spells in case they were taken away. This is the biggest reward I've gotten from fighting in this world. It's as valuable as the recovery seeds of spiritual chi. With this, I can forge the 4th divine body, the fire divine body. In the end, Jiang Tian's eyes fell on a giant spherical crystal stone. He was quite pleased. This crystal stone was about 10 meters wide. It was shiny, but its surface wasn't smooth. There were many tubes like giant blood vessels on its back, which had been cut off. At the front, there were ring-shaped divine patterns that looked like growth rings. They were nested with each other, making it look like an eyeball that had just been dug out. This was the internal structure of the artificial sun. Its core array was the most important, just like the processor of a computer. In the cultivation world, it was usually called the sun jade eye, or the crystal eye. It was essentially an array made of heavenly fire jade with the function of collecting and condensing starlight. As for the external components, they were much larger and had a diameter of several kilometers. They were useless to Jiang Tian, so he gave them to the others to forge artifacts and weapons. The artificial sun was embedded in the star map in the sky. The latter half of the sun was exposed outside the sky. It would erupt with a large area of runes to absorb the starlight in the sky. After being strengthened and condensed by the sun jade eye array, it would shoot into the kingdom of heaven from the front. It was because of this that the light here was more than 10 times that of an ordinary world. It was full of vitality and allowed the holy clan of light to cultivate quickly. Jiang Tian searched the surface of the sun jade eye for a while. Suddenly, his vitality burst out and he found a protruding circular pattern. His true origin gushed out and he flicked his fingers in a certain pattern. After Jiang Tian flicked and pressed a few times, the pattern was lit up by Jiang Tian's vitality and began to rotate. At the same time, the internal components of the sun were constantly changing as the array was unraveled. There was a clanging sound of metal rubbing against each other. The complex array patterns on the sun jade eye lit up continuously. The surface of the sun jade eye was dented and retracted. The sun jade eye seemed to be alive. Everyone was shocked and retreated. Their expressions changed drastically. The sun jade eye shrunk layer by layer and changed rapidly. After a while, it turned into the size of a basketball. It was as if it was cast in gold. It was unusually heavy and golden. It was dazzling and emitted an ancient aura. How could this be? Everyone at the scene was shocked and their bodies trembled. This artificial sun had an extraordinary origin. It was the creation of a world. No one expected Jiang Tian to be able to control it. Chapter 1057. For a long time, they had been trying to create a sun like this person, but they were at a loss when it came to the complicated and delicate structure of the array. It was like a primary school student facing calculus. It was completely beyond their understanding. However, Jiang Tian only casually tapped and rubbed it a few times before he controlled it. It looked simple, but that was why it was so difficult for Jiang Tian. This sun jade eye shouldn't have been made by the sky race. You belong to the giant race and you're not good at making Dharma treasures. Jiang Tian stroked his chin, revealing a look of admiration, and said, I don't know who made it. It might be from an even more powerful star race. He noticed that there was silence around him. Jiang Tian turned around and looked at Lu Huaxi, Yi Yi, and the sacred masters. He found that they were all staring at him dumbfoundedly. Jiang Tian smiled. Can't you accept the fact that this artificial sun was made by someone else? No, it's not that. Yi Yi stammered and said with a trembling voice, Immortal Master Jiang, you've controlled this sun jade eye. Oh, it's not complicated to control this sun jade eye. Jiang Tian was enlightened. He thought to himself, I've made a few giant suns before. The structure of those suns was thousands of times more complicated than this one and they were as powerful as real suns. Jiang Tian had seen too many sun jade eyes like this in his previous life and he was very familiar with them. There was a set of rules that didn't deviate from the basic principles. For others, it might be unpredictable, but for Jiang Tian, it was easy for him to find a way to break through it. Besides, this person had made the sun as an array for illumination, not an offensive Dharma artifact. It wasn't dangerous and it wasn't unbreakable. Besides, the creator had left a back door to control it so that it would be easier for others to take it. However, there was naturally no need for Jiang Tian to say this out loud. He only casually said, he just said casually, I'm going to absorb this sun jade eye and refine it into my dantian. I'll have a supreme divine body and a few more divine powers. It'll also help me form a divine-grade golden core and lay a solid foundation. Absorb the sun crystal eye. Create a fire attribute divine body. True Lord Jiang, don't you already have 3 divine bodies? Coupled with his fire attribute divine body. This time, Yi Yi, Lu Huaxi, and the other experts at the side were unable to restrain the shock in their hearts, and they cried out with shock. Not only could Jiang Tian control this sun jade eye, he could even refine and absorb it to forge a type of constitution. That artificial sun had shrouded a dimension for thousands of years. Countless overlords had risen while bathing in its sacred light and became famous. There were countless golden core cultivators among them. And now, the boundless holy light contained within had been absorbed by Jiang Tian's people. How powerful would the refined divine body be? On top of that, Jiang Tian also had 3 other types of divine physiques. He also had the purple lightning pupils, so how strong could Jiang Tian be after cultivating the fire element divine physique? Jiang Tian didn't even need to use the heaven-shaking bow. He could kill sacred ancestor Qi Liao with a single finger. The third sacred master and the other sacred masters were shocked, but they were also complaining in their hearts. If Kang Teichu could use the sun jade eye, none of them would be able to create suns. How could they cultivate in the future? Jiang Tian also noticed that the overlords of the heavenly state looked worse than constipation. They were obviously forcing a smile. Jiang Tian was an old demon who had lived for 10,000 years. How could he not know what was going on in their minds? He smiled and said, "I'm only here because the sacred ancestor wants to destroy my foundation on earth. It has nothing to do with you. Since you're sincere, I'll let bygones be bygones. I'll also teach you the divine arts to communicate with the power of the stars and cultivate." What? When Jiang Tian's words came out, many people started to become restless. After all, Jiang Tian was so young and already so powerful. The divine arts he had must be earth-shattering. Even sacred ancestor Qi Liao wanted to have them. Just a little of it would be enough for their cultivation to increase rapidly and reach a new level. Moreover, they didn't have any deep grudges against Jiang Tian. If they could use this opportunity to befriend Jiang Tian and become his disciple, it would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Master Kong, you've already destroyed the artificial sun in the sky. Only the artificial stars are left. I'm afraid. However, the third sacred master shook his head and smiled bitterly. You're wrong. What I'm teaching you is to communicate with the real stars in the universe. You can let the starlight and power of the stars enter your body to cultivate your meridians and transform your body. It's not like those artificial stars. Jiang Tian said calmly. What? Absorbing the real power of the stars? There's such a divine art in the world. Everyone was in disbelief when they heard this. It was as if they were listening to a heavenly book. Among all the cultivation techniques in the world, the most profound was not the thunder technique, nor the 5 elements technique, nor was it the evil Tao that could drive the gods and control ghosts. It was to control the power of the stars. As the saying went, the heavens were superior to the earth, the universe was above and the earth was below. The heavens were the stars, the earth was the mountains and rivers, the Qi was the earth, and the Qi was the 5 elements. No matter how powerful a deity was, how could he defeat the sun, the moon, the stars, and the vast universe? The so-called Qimen Dun Jia was actually using the power of the stars in the universe. However, the stars were too far away from humans after all. No matter how powerful the power of the stars was, when it came to the human world, it was already very small and couldn't be felt. Cultivation arts that could directly absorb the power of the stars might not exist on the entire ancient earth. Even if they did, they would have been extinct a long time ago. That was why the ancient sages had set up the heavenly cycle star array to form a dome to gather the power of the stars and the true fire of the sun for their people to absorb. Cultivators asked about the way of heaven. The closer the divine art was to the universe, the more profound it was. As for the divine art that could absorb the power of the stars, it stood at the top and looked down on the world. If one could absorb the power of the stars, even a golden core cultivator would be crushed and a nascent soul cultivator would have to avoid it. Who wouldn't want to control such a vast power and such a powerful divine art? Just like Li Longyuan in the Tianxing domain. He only used a perfected immortal Dharma treasure like the star tree to evolve a trace of the Big Dipper and dominate an entire domain. When Jiang Tian said that he was going to teach them such a divine art, how could the many overlords not be shocked and excited? In fact, the cultivation arts of the stars were the ultimate arts for everyone. They could only look at it but couldn't get it. Some people didn't even dare to think about it. However, to Jiang Tian, it was the foundation of the real cultivation world. It could be as small as building Dharma artifacts, as big as space travel and interstellar jumps. How could it not be used? After Jiang Tian stepped into the divine realm, he even used the power of a galaxy to attack. There was no problem at all in teaching them a little bit. Even if they could absorb the power of the stars, it was only the power of the solar system. Even if they could condense light crystals or form a flawless pure light body, Jiang Tian could destroy them with his fists. This time, many overlords were moved. Even the elders of the older generation had a strange light in their eyes as they praised, "Good, good, good." Immortal Master Jiang's heart is wider than the star sea. He really deserves to be the master of the sacred hall. Ha! Immortal Master Jiang is the master of the earth domain and the Tianxing domain. He has become the master of the three realms now. However, this is the real deal. They were endlessly grateful to Jiang Tian, flattering him like a tide. Jiang Tian taught them the stellar condensation art. It could absorb the power of the sun, the moon, and the stars. However, it was limited to the stars in the solar system to purify oneself and condense the sacred light to improve one's cultivation. Many overlords couldn't wait and immediately sat down cross-legged to cultivate. Immediately, they felt a vast amount of light energy surging into their bodies. They couldn't help but be ecstatic. Some of them even cried tears of joy and kowtowed to Jiang Tian, worshipping him and expressing their gratitude. This was Jiang Tian's strategy. Attack some of them and win over some of them. Only by using sticks and carrots could he make them submit completely. Chapter 1058. After they left happily, Jiang Tian could finally start cultivating in seclusion. Sigh, I wonder how Qing'er and the child are doing now. Jiang Tian sat cross-legged in the third sacred mountain's sacred palace. His eyes were filled with longing and worry. Although he had only left for a few days and had left a seed of revival before he left, he could not help but be worried. He even had the urge to go back through the space passage now. Jiang Tian, don't worry. Sister Qing'er is a good person. She will be fine. Huang Linger comforted him gently. At this time, Jiang Tian's body was injured in many places. After all, even if he had 3 divine bodies, he could only fight against golden core cultivators. He was too far away from the divine ancestor who had formed the nascent soul. At that time, if Jiang Tian didn't draw the Heaven Shaker bow at the last moment without hesitation at the cost of damaging his blood essence and lifespan, he might have died an unnatural death. Jiang Tian's injuries were very serious. If he forcefully traveled through the teleportation array now, he would be more seriously injured even if he had the protection method given by the Holy Clan of Light. New injuries would be added to old injuries, and he might die if he was not careful. Jiang Tian also understood this and nodded with a bitter smile. Even if he missed it, he could only suppress it and repair his body as soon as possible, condense the 4th divine body, and break through to the next level. Brahman is destroyed, and the master behind it, West Earth, is likely to invade Earth. Jiang Tian's eyes showed a trace of worry as he thought to himself. However, before leaving Earth, I have already passed the memories and information in Kasayapa Guru's soul to Yi Tianren and taught him how to deal with it. I believe they can handle it on their own. In the end, he cleared all distracting thoughts and began to cultivate in seclusion. However, in Heavenly Kingdom, the impact of this great change had only just begun. In fact, the divine ancestor's bloodline was the purest of the Holy Clan of Light, just like the royal family. He had many descendants, tens of thousands of them. These people were all loyal. Previously, they took advantage of the chaos to escape to various parts of Heavenly Kingdom. They hid and secretly accumulated strength to make a comeback. Kang Te-Chu is a lowly and filthy ant from the lower realm. How could he be worthy of being our master? Some of the sacred ancestors' direct descendants were clamoring. They took the lead, fanned the flames, and used their bloodlines to incite a large number of followers. We cannot submit. We must fight to the death with Kang Te-Chu. The dignity of the kingdom of heaven cannot be blasphemed. We want to reorganize the exiled Templars and overthrow Kang Te-Chu's tyranny. It was unknown how many people were roaring like this, and there were even some elders who were pounding their chests and stamping their feet. Not to mention the bloodline of the Templars, any random person in the heavenly kingdom thought highly of themselves. They considered themselves to be gods and regarded Earth as a garbage dump and a cockroach nest. At this moment, they simply could not accept Jiang Tian suppressing them. But the wind gradually changed direction. The absolute beginning true God is very powerful and has 3 supreme divine bodies. He might be the reincarnation of a true God. The absolute beginning true God is kind-hearted and loves the world. This time, they were here to solve the crisis of the earth world, and also to resolve the doubts of the preaching of the Tao. He's going to teach supreme cultivation arts that can help the sacred race of light evolve. Huang Linger is lecturing on the 3rd sacred mountain. Many sacred lords and divine knights are listening and have benefited a lot. Kang Techu loves all living beings and has issued an order. From now on, the sacred race of light, the giants, the elves, and the humans on earth will be equal and united. Everyone can use the power of light of the sacred hall. These news broke out one after another. Many sacred lords, city lords and other important figures expressed their opinions one after another. Under the encouragement of the sacred mountain masters who had surrendered, Jiang Tian gradually turned from an invader to a peerless overlord, a true god and a wise lord in everyone's eyes. Especially when they heard that Jiang Tian was handsome, many sacred lords became greedy for Jiang Tian and became his fanatical fans, praising his deeds. After stabilizing the situation, gather everyone. Take the heads of all the descendants of the sacred ancestors. Leave none of them alive. The sacred mountains, fallen angels, and the giants immediately formed an army to execute the beheading plan. They trampled over mountains and rivers and chased after the descendants of the sacred ancestor and the sacred emperor. In a desolate mountain range at the edge of heaven. Kill. Revenge. The 3,000 titans roared, their blood boiling as they surrounded a group of sacred ancestor descendants. The descendants of the sacred ancestor were all riding noble unicorns. The leader was in his 20s, but he was arrogant. This person was none other than the 7th Saint Prince. When Jiang Tian was fighting with the sacred ancestor, Qi Liao, he had escaped and gathered his forces to plan revenge. Now that he was stopped, he wasn't afraid at all. He glared at the giants and gritted his teeth. Yi, you old bastard! How dare you chase after me? You're asking for death. Kill him. The wrath of the giant tribe will crush you into dust. Chop him into pieces. Let's see how long he can remain arrogant. You once bathed our home in blood. Today, we'll make you pay with your blood. Yi Shaoman didn't even need Yi to give the order. She had already charged forward with her spear. Immediately, men and women of all ages joined the battle. They roared and charged forward with an indomitable will to fight. The Holy Prince was the most vicious and ruthless of them all. He had slaughtered many giants and cities in the past. Now, he was enraged when he saw his enemy. There were figures all over the mountain range. People were shouting and beasts were roaring. The crowd was agitated. The giants waved their maces and axes and charged toward the sacred prince ferociously. A great battle broke out immediately. Many overlords died. As the saying went, a desperate army was bound to win. The giant tribe had been suppressed for too long. Now that they had Jiang Tian as their backer, they all erupted. One by one, the holy tribe of light was killed. Holy light bloomed one after another. Their bodies exploded, and broken limbs flew everywhere. Shimmering holy blood dyed the mountain range red. Legend has it that this land belonged to the giant tribe in ancient times. I don't know why the inheritance was lost. Now it seems that they are indeed very powerful. The radiant imperial family members and their loyal followers who were surrounded were terrified. Their scalps tingled as they recalled many ancient legends and re-evaluated their fighting strength. In fact, the giant tribe had the Quafu bloodline. Their individual combat power was not inferior to that of the holy tribe of light. However, the Holy Tribe of Light had relied on schemes and plots to seize power and kill the Holy Tribe of Light. Boom! The millstone-like axe swung and shook thousands of soldiers. Instantly, a few Holy Tribe of Light suffered broken bones. Smack! With a swing of the mace, a head was sent flying like a baseball. The skull was sent flying, and white brain matter and red blood spurted out in the air. Let me go. I surrender. Ah! Spare me. At this time, the Holy Tribe of Light had no advantage in numbers or schemes. They were really killed until their souls were frozen. One by one, they began to run and beg for mercy. Woo 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 woo. The ancient horn sounded, and the giant tribe warriors pushed forward. Every one of them had a trace of Ho Yi's blood in them. This was the bloodline that Hua Xia's ancestor had left for them. It surged and burned, and the more they fought, the stronger they became. A bunch of idiots following Kang Te-chu. How long do you think he can last? When I restore my country, I will kill all of you. The seventh Saint Prince roared with blood all over his body. Originally, he wanted to kill the giant tribe and kill them all. However, now, he had no choice but to avoid the attack. The seventh Saint Prince led a group of black armor knights and paid a heavy price to kill a bloody path out of the encirclement. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, his expression changed drastically. This was because he saw a Saint Lord-level figure, the master of the third sacred mountain, appear in front of him. Chapter 1059. The seventh Saint Prince thought the sacred leader was there to save him. However, he immediately noticed that the sacred leader's eyes were sinister and he was smiling maliciously. Just as he was about to run away, he turned around and saw several more Saint Lord-level powerhouses appear behind him like ghosts. The seventh Saint Prince believed that he could escape with his life, and he even had the chance to kill Jiang Tian. After all, Jiang Tian had been severely injured in the battle with divine ancestor Qiliao. He had also used a lot of blood essence and cultivation to draw the heaven-shaking bow. He would need a few years to recover. There were still many remaining members of the Sacred Hall. If they gathered together, they might be able to make a comeback. However, he had never thought that these sacred leaders, who had received endless benefits from the Sacred Hall, would come to kill him on behalf of Jiang Tian. These sacred leaders were very powerful. They were at least late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. He was only at early-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. How could he resist them? The seventh Saint Prince's face turned pale. He knelt on the ground and said with tears in his eyes, "All of you have received great help from the Sacred Hall. How can you not remember it? If you follow me to kill that demon Kang Te-chu and restore the Sacred Hall, I will reward you handsomely. You will all be able to enter the Senate. If you hadn't said those words, I might have let you go. However, if you dare to be disrespectful to true God Jiang, I will cut you into pieces." Sacred leader's eyes suddenly became cold. Kang Te-chu destroyed the artificial sun. This is equivalent to cutting off your resources for cultivation. How can you submit to him? The seventh Saint Prince was very angry. His eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. He stumbled backward, feeling that these people were unreasonable. The cultivation techniques of the Sacred Hall are too outdated. True God Jiang has already taught us how to absorb the real power of the stars. Another sacred lord-level powerhouse appeared and blocked his path. True Immortal Jiang's teachings will be a blessing for all generations to come. You still want to kill him? Are you human? Another sacred lord-level expert also appeared and laughed savagely. There were a total of 4 sacred lords, and they surrounded him. At that moment, the sacred prince was like a caged beast. He trembled in fear and despair. No matter how strong an expert was, they would still be afraid of death, and it was even to the extent that they were even more afraid of death. When facing the threat of death, he didn't have his usual arrogance, composure, and calmness, and was like a bird that was startled by the twang of a bow. "All right, everyone, let's send the Holy Prince on his way." The third Saint Master smiled coldly and took the initiative to attack. How could the seventh Saint Prince be a match for this Saint Master? This Saint Master could kill him with a single strike, yet he had only beaten him half to death. After that, the other sacred lords all attacked and killed the sacred prince. Some cut off his head, some cut off his arms and legs, and finally cut him into 8 pieces so that they could report back to Jiang Tian. This was not a simple killing, but a declaration of allegiance. Only if they killed the descendant of the sacred ancestor would Jiang Tian truly trust them. This scene was still happening in the entire heavenly state. The descendants of the sacred ancestor were wiped out by these experts, and none of them were left alive. Jiang Tian had only taught them the stellar condensation art, and he had already displayed his vast power. If they became enemies with Jiang Tian, they would end up worse than the sacred ancestor. On the other hand, submitting to Jiang Tian would bring them great benefits. Jiang Tian wouldn't care even if a few of them were left alive. They were already too weak to cause any big waves. After he received the report, he was still immersed in seclusion. However, while Jiang Tian was in seclusion, he was right. Just as he had guessed, the West Earth dimension had begun to invade Earth. At the old site of the Holy See at the Vatican. In less than a month's time, this place had already been renovated. However, on the tall lintel, there was a huge golden plaque with a few words written on it, Tianqing School, Guangming Branch. Messiah had already submitted and announced to the world that the Holy See's orthodoxy would change its doctrine and rewrite the scriptures. From now on, the only true God the Holy See believed in was the God of absolute beginning. He was one of the staunch preachers of the God of absolute beginning. Every country was shocked. This was a major event that involved the faith of more than 1 billion people around the world. At the same time, the Tianqing school's power had greatly increased. It was worthy of being the world's #1 orthodoxy. Even Kunlun's prestige was firmly suppressed. In fact, the believers around the world had different reactions. Some could not accept the collapse of their faith and chose to commit suicide. According to incomplete statistics, over 1,000 people had committed suicide in just a month. Some believers were flustered and exasperated, thinking that they had been deceived by the Holy See. There was no omnipotent true God at all. They burned scriptures, destroyed churches and monasteries, and broke out in conflicts with the clergy. However, under the guidance of Messiah, more believers had changed their faith to the God of absolute beginning. Some of them were even fanatical believers. After all, even if every country strictly guarded the existing order and the credibility of the government, it was the age of the mobile internet after all. Many videos of the battle at the Vatican had been leaked through various secret channels. In the videos, the power displayed by Jiang Tian was beyond the limits of their imagination. He flew freely and floated in the air with a giant avatar hundreds of meters tall. It could destroy the world, sweep in all directions, and kill tens of thousands of people. It was more dazzling than Hollywood special effects. If that was not a true God, what was? In fact, this had a series of effects. Many devout believers were willing to spend a lot of money to get a visa from Sidoni. Suddenly, there was another wave of immigration. Sidoni was very popular because of the Sheng Yuan Immortal Healing Village and the medical livestream program. Now, it was the first choice for immigrants around the world. As a result, Sidoni's population had also skyrocketed. Their economic, military, and cultural strength had risen steadily. Even many developed countries in Europe and the United States were envious. In addition to showing saint spells all day long, Messiah went around to bewitch people to believe in the God of absolute beginning, as well as changing the scriptures. Every day, she would go to the original location of the Holy Tomb to pray that Jiang Tian would win and return safely. If Jiang Tian lost, then the strong people of Heavenly Kingdom would come down and kill him. In fact, he was a little regretful. At that time, he was beaten to death by Jiang Tian. Saint Adam could not hold on. If he did not surrender, he might have been killed by Jiang Tian. The situation was compelling. However, after thinking about it, Jiang Tian was invincible on earth. How could he be a match for the Holy Clan of Light in Heavenly Kingdom? If Kong Techu lost, then as a traitor of heavenly kingdom, he would be thrown into Mangum Mountain and eaten alive by those poisonous dragons that could spit fire. However, he had no other choice at this time. The Holy See, the Brahmin, and the European reclusive royalty had been beaten half to death by Jiang Tian. Moreover, under the guidance of Yingying Laozu, Huaxia's reclusive royalty had followed Jiang Tian. He was even less qualified to challenge. Resistance would only lead to death. The newly built Tianqing School's Guangming branch building was a combination of Chinese and Western architecture, or rather, it was neither fish nor fowl. From the outside, it looked like an ancient palace with red walls and green tiles, but inside, there was a dome. However, the paintings on the dome were not the stories of the Holy See, but the many deeds of Jiang Tian. For example, Jiang Tian showed off his power on Mount Everest, killed the president of the Singapore Chinese Association, Wang Chongyan, defeated the Ri Nation, and battled Miyamoto Geniki, defeated the Dark Parliament, killed the prison-suppressing demon king Nie Mingyuan, the Blood Clan, and the Wolf Ancestor, and so on. In addition, there were some ancient stories in the Holy See's canon, such as the creation of the world by the absolute beginning, creating people in his own image, and setting up the Garden of Eden, and so on. Actually, these stories had nothing to do with Jiang Tian. They had nothing to do with him at all. However, history was written for the victors, and half of the history books in this world were fake. The Holy See insisted that the God of absolute beginning was the highest God, the creator of the world, the omniscient and omnipotent God. Countless years ago, he created that piece of molecular cloud and used his great magic power to cause it to collapse, resulting in the Big Bang, which then led to our current universe. Jiang Tian was the reincarnation of the absolute beginning, and the God of absolute beginning had descended to earth. Regarding this, the Tianqing school was also very helpless. They only asked them to communicate with Tang Xiaozi and Sidoni's Archbishop to hear when they were making up stories to avoid conflicts. Tang Xiaozi was originally a Buddhist, and he even studied it quite deeply. However, later on, he changed his faith and only believed in the God of absolute beginning. Moreover, in the aspect of confusing people, he displayed an extremely high talent. His words were like pearls, and his tongue was like a lotus flower. Now, he was the right-hand man of Sidoni's Archbishop Tahir, and there was a possibility that he would become the next archbishop. When Messiah was praying, he never expected that a chilling news had already exploded in the upper class of the world, like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. This news was even more terrifying than the invasion of the heavenly state. On the Death Hill in India, an ancient portal appeared and exploded. It was suspected that a powerhouse from the West Earth dimension had invaded Earth. Chapter 1060. However, Messiah didn't know about it yet. She just knelt in the cemetery and prayed sincerely. At this moment, the moon-worshipping wolf King Alexander was wearing an old military uniform. He walked into the main hall of the Light Branch with his hands behind his back. He looked around and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Messiah's flattery skills are top-notch. He had been seriously injured in the battle at the Lansang River. The Brahmin's great guardian had beaten him up badly. However, Jiang Tian and the Tianqing sect had been conquering the world, plundering everywhere. They didn't lack experts who could refine pills and concoct medicine either. All kinds of spirit pills and miraculous medicines were as plentiful as the sea. He had already recovered after taking the pills. Messiah, who was praying in front of the portal in the tomb, immediately rushed over to meet him. She bowed deeply and said, "Saint Alan, an old man. Greetings, Senior Alexander." The moon-worshipping Wolf King panicked at being treated so courteously by the former master of the orthodoxy. He couldn't take it anymore. He quickly returned the bow and said, "Senior Messiah, I don't deserve it. How can I deserve such great respect?" The Moon Wolf King became famous after the First World War. He only became famous after the Second World War. He had once controlled the Russian Winter Army and could talk to the Russian Emperor. However, compared to Messiah, an old monster who had lived for more than 2,000 years, and the founder of the First Orthodoxy in the West, he was too far away. In the Middle Ages, even the royal families of various European countries had to bow down to him. No, no, I deserve it, I deserve it. Messiah's face was full of joy. She smiled and said, Brother Alexander has been following Master Kong since the battle at the Sword Tomb Island. He has fought side by side with Master Kong several times and is deeply trusted. I hope you can put in a good word for me in front of Master Kong in the future. They were all speaking in Mandarin. Nowadays, the official language of Sidoni and Tianqing School was Mandarin. The learning of Mandarin had even started on a global scale. In Sidoni, speaking English would be despised. If you could speak some ancient Chinese and recite some poems, you would be more popular. The moon-worshipping Wolf King agreed. In the past, the moon-worshipping Wolf King did not have the qualifications to be respected by Messiah. Even the wolf ancestors are not qualified to speak with Messiah. Even Saint Augustine, Messiah's servant, is far from her. Back then, many wolf ancestors had been hunted down by the Holy See, such as Saint Augustine, like stray dogs. They either lived in the extreme cold in the extreme north or relied on the military of a large country to survive. But the past was the past, and the present was the present. In Tianqing School, although the moon-worshipping Wolf King's position was not as high as the two guardians, the disciples of the three giants, the personal disciples, and the hall masters of the artifact refining and alchemy halls, he was in charge of one of the most elite werewolves in the heavenly army. He belonged to the second echelon and was a big shot in the inner sanctum. Especially during the battle at the Lansang River, he bravely killed the enemy and was highly regarded by Jiang Tian and his wife. He even had a chance to be promoted to hall master. As for Messiah, she was far from it. According to Yi Tianren, he had yet to pass the probation period. That's easy. No problem. Although the moon-worshipping Wolf King understood that Messiah was being so respectful to him because of Jiang Tian, he was still very pleased. He puffed out his chest and laughed heartily as he accepted Messiah's bow. Suddenly, the moon-worshipping Wolf King's expression changed slightly. He pressed on the air earpiece and said, "What did you say?" "India, the Death Hill exploded. This might be the explosion of the space-time gate and the invasion of West Earth." Invasion of West Earth? Messiah's expression changed drastically and she became uneasy. Although the Holy See and the Brahmin cooperated to deal with Jiang Tian, both sides had been wary of each other. Kasyapa Guru would not tell her a lot of information. But Messiah had lived for more than 2,000 years and was knowledgeable. She knew a lot of ancient secrets and how terrifying West Earth was. She heard that it was also a fragment of the ancient earth and a sacred place for cultivation. There were many foundation establishment overlords and a few golden core cultivators there. Also, the overlords on Thunder Sound Mountain were extremely powerful and special. They belonged to the Gold Clan and had an extraordinary background. They were said to be indestructible and immortal. Even Heavenly World did not dare to provoke them. "I'll go there right away." The moon-worshipping Wolf King's expression became unprecedentedly serious. After ending the call, he immediately said, "Messiah, wait here for Immortal Master Jiang. Once he comes back, tell him immediately that the overlords of West Earth have invaded." "Are they really from West Earth?" Messiah was anxious. Jiang Tian was facing heavenly country, and his life and death were unknown. Now that the strong practitioners of West Earth were invading, this was a calamity that could wipe out the world. "That's right. There's already a clue." The moon-worshipping Wolf King nodded solemnly. Jiang Tian had speculated that the Death Hill might be the teleport point between the Brahmin and West Earth, so they had to guard it tightly. After Jiang Tian seized the divine soul of the Kasyapa Guru, he received a lot of information and passed it on to Yi Tianren. After the battle at the Vatican, Yi Tianren immediately gathered the superpowers around the world with Chao Shixiang to share the news. Many superpowers around the world formed a special organization, the Global Defense Alliance, with the top 5 as the core. They were ready to face the possible challenges from other dimensions. After all, everyone had seen the power of the Holy See and the Brahmin overlords. As for them, they were merely the puppets of Heavenly State and West Earth, the two-dimensional worlds of Heavenly State and West Earth. Sidoni and Tianqing School sent Tang Linglong as the deputy leader of the West Earth Emergency Response Team and the deputy commander of Sidoni's Sky Army. Together with Hua Xia, India, the United States, and the European Union, they deployed 300,000 troops to monitor the Death Hill. This was also Jiang Tian's arrangement when he went to the heavenly world to train Tang Linglong. Now, the fluctuations in that area were getting stronger and stronger. Everyone speculated that the overlords of West Earth were about to descend. As far as I know, this kind of spatial passage can't be opened at will. Just like the passage to Heavenly World, it can only be opened once every few decades or even centuries. According to Jia Yi, it will take at least 3 years for West Earth to descend. Messiah's face was pale and nervous as she provided some information. After hearing this, the Moon Wolf King shook his head and said with a slightly stern expression, "Things are different in different times." Before the battle at the Vatican, Master had instructed us that after the Brahmin overlords were destroyed, West Earth might take action one step ahead and use a special spatial treasure to forcefully open a spatial portal. So, after the battle at the Vatican, we immediately rushed to India, which is India. I see. Messiah hesitated for a moment, then suddenly gritted her teeth and said, "Why don't the old man go and help Tianqing School?" He knew that Tianqing School had a strict promotion and incentive system, and it had always rewarded people based on their contributions. He had just submitted to Tianqing School, so he had to make some contributions to obtain Jiang Tian's approval. In addition, the portal to Heavenly World was above the Holy Tomb. If Heavenly World defeated Jiang Tian and descended to the mortal world, he would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. It would be easier for him to escape if he was further away. No. You are guarding the portal here. This is also a big matter, and we can't allow the slightest mistake. This is not only my intention, but also the intention of the matriarch and the left and right guardians. Alessandra said in a serious tone. Please tell the matriarch, Madame Zhao, and the left and right guardians that I, Messiah, will not disappoint you. Messiah bowed deeply and said with a solemn expression. The Moon Wolf King nodded. Then, they left the old site of the Holy See, boarded a military helicopter, and rushed toward the airport. This world is really going to be chaotic. Sitting in the private helicopter, the Moon Wolf King, who had been through hundreds of battles, was anxious at this moment. Cold sweat broke out on his face, as if he was facing a great enemy. He had experienced World War I and World War II, and later served as the person in charge of the Russian winter soldiers, the chief instructor, and suppressed many powerful organizations in Russia. He could be said to be an experienced and knowledgeable person. But even World War I and World War II were only wars of human civilization, wars of nations, and wars of class and ideology. But this time, it was a war between Earth and the dimensional world, a war between two completely different civilization systems. Chapter 1061. India. The old site of the Death Hill. The Death Hill was the historical site of Mohenjo-daro in India. It meant Death Valley in Indian. It covered an area of about 9 square kilometers. Most of the buildings were made of granite, but they had already become ruins, leaving only the foundation. However, through the remnants of the foundation, it could be seen that the original city was scattered all over the place. It was convenient for transportation, and the planning was reasonable. It was completely comparable to a modern city. It's quite a lineup. When the moon-worshipping Wolf King arrived at this place on a transport plane, his pupils constricted as he was secretly shocked. Countless military vehicles formed a dragon-like convoy. Tanks were like a rolling torrent of steel, pushing toward this place. The army and air force from the world's major countries had set up camp, set up defense lines, built bunkers, trenches, fortresses, and all kinds of defensive structures. In the sky, fighter jets roared, and transport planes rose and fell. They came and went very frequently. Countless soldiers walked out of the transport planes and vehicles and formed a deep and majestic defense line 30 kilometers around the Death Hill. If one looked carefully, they would find that the soldiers who entered this place were all wearing anti-radiation suits and gas masks. In addition, this place was desolate and there were few plants. It suddenly gave people a feeling of doomsday, as if a disaster had occurred. This place is a mysterious place. It's not inferior to the Tunguska explosion. The moon-worshipping Wolf King muttered to himself, and his expression gradually became serious. Here, the inspectors found evidence that many violent explosions had occurred here. All the buildings within a 1-kilometer radius of the center of the explosion were reduced to powder. Many skeletons were found further away from the center. From the way the skeletons were placed, it could be seen that the disaster of death had suddenly descended, and no one had noticed it. These skeletons strangely contained radiation content that was comparable to the radiation content of the victims of the nuclear attacks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even after more than 3,000 years. Not only that, the researchers were surprised to find that the rubble field after the ancient city burned looked very much like Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic bomb explosion. There were still traces of shock waves and nuclear radiation left on the ground. Moreover, even after more than 3,600 years, the current radiation level could still kill people. Therefore, the soldiers had to wear all kinds of anti-radiation equipment. The moon-worshipping Wolf King was the person in charge of Sidoni's special werewolf squad. His military rank wasn't low at all, so someone immediately came to greet him. After putting on the anti-radiation suit, the moon-worshipping Wolf King arrived at the edge of the Death Hill under the lead of a guard from the Earth Defense Alliance. However, he discovered that many elites from Tianqing School had already arrived, and there was no lack of political figures among them. There were even generals and high-ranking officials in the Ministry of Defense and the military of various countries who had a few stars on their shoulders. Commander-in-Chief Tang, this is the super defensive line that we have prepared for the powerhouses from the heavenly state world that are about to descend. The United Nations Army formed by the 5 permanent members, Sidoni's Sky Army, and the Indian Native Army, a total of 100,000 troops have gathered here. General of the U.S. Pentagon, Keynes, stood at the edge of the Death Hill in a radiation suit and reported to Tang Linglong. So far, we have built 10 missile interceptor positions, equipped with the most advanced Immortal Slayer weapons, as well as laser cannons and armor-piercing missiles. As long as the headquarters gives the order, we will raze this place to the ground. The threat of modern weapons to the Foundation establishment powerhouses had been greatly reduced. However, with 100,000 troops and modern weapons of mass destruction, the odds of victory were very high. Moreover, there were also various super forces such as the Universe Shield, Blue Storm, Winter Soldier, and the Huaxiaolong formation. Tang Linglong, who was dressed in a military uniform, had a slightly stern expression. She said in a deep voice, "But my master said that the West Earth world is even more powerful than the heavenly state world, and there are golden core powerhouses there. And golden core powerhouses are probably able to fight against nuclear weapons. I suggest that the Coelian enter the Indian territory, or enter the Indian Ocean with Coelian battleships and aircraft carriers." Next to her, a general from the Indian Ministry of Defense was furious. He said resolutely, "We have already made a big concession by allowing the Earth Defense Alliance to enter. But we will never allow such evil weapons like the Coelian to enter. How can there be a space-time gate here? How can our country be connected to another world? This is slander." Although many major countries in the world had purchased the Coelian system, India did not. Once they entered, it would be equivalent to the other party placing a weapon even more terrifying than nuclear weapons in their country. How could he agree to that? Keynes shouted angrily, "Your Excellency, you better understand the current situation. Right now, Sidoni and the 5 permanent members are helping India. Once the heavenly state world invades, the first to suffer will be you. Then we can only use the Coelian of Sidoni and Huaxia to attack from a distance. After all, the Coelian of these 2 countries are the closest to each other." Tang Linglong held the binoculars and looked at the ruins of the Death Hill in the distance. Her expression was solemn. Next to her, the Indian general jumped up in exasperation, but Keynes pulled him aside and threatened him. After obtaining the information of many mysterious places in the world from the Pentagon, Jiang Tian asked the intelligence department of Tianqing School and Huaxia to conduct a deeper level of excavation and investigation. The information that Tang Linglong currently had made her feel very uneasy, and it also added to her confusion. It could even be said that the more she knew, the more confused she was. There were a large number of melted clay and mineral fragments in the ruins. Experiments conducted by the laboratories of Sidonia Academy of Science and Huaxia Academy of Science showed that they were melted at a temperature as high as 14,000 degrees Celsius to 15,000 degrees Celsius. Under the production conditions at that time, such a high temperature could only be formed in the forging furnace of the smelting workshop, and a large number of melted clay and mineral fragments could never be formed in a small number of forging furnaces. Scientists also found many traces of explosions in the city of Mohenjo-daro. The buildings in the center of the explosion area were razed to the ground. From the center outwards, the farther the distance, the smaller the degree of destruction, and the buildings in the outermost area were almost intact. This was very similar to the scene after an atomic bomb explosion. In addition, in the ancient Sanskrit narrative poem Mahabharata, there was a description of this place. It was as if the power of nature burst out all at once. The sun was spinning. The heat of the weapon set the earth ablaze. The elephants were burned by the fire and ran wildly, trying to escape this terrible disaster. The river boiled, hundreds of animals died, the enemy fell one by one, the corpses were scattered. Horses and chariots were burned, and the whole battlefield was a scene of fire. The sea was dead silent. The wind blew, and the earth lit up. It was a really creepy scene. The bodies of the dead were burned by the terrible fire, and their limbs were no longer intact. We have never seen or heard of such a weapon. This terrible scene made many people associate this weapon with a nuclear bomb. Some people even thought that Mohenjo-daro was destroyed by aliens. At present, the theory that scientists most agreed with was the lightning destruction theory, that it was the mysterious black lightning that destroyed Mohenjo-daro. Black lightning evolved from a rare ball of lightning. Under normal circumstances, they were small in size and very low in brightness, like a cloud of black fog, but they contained a lot of energy and were not afraid of ordinary lightning protection facilities. But when they gathered together, they could emit poisonous gas, and they were particularly prone to explosion. As long as one black lightning exploded, it could cause a series of explosions, instantly producing a high temperature of 15,000 degrees Celsius. The damage caused by this kind of explosion was similar to that of Mohenjo-daro, and the unearthed relics of Mohenjo-daro showed that they had been exposed to high temperatures of 14,000 to 15,000 degrees Celsius. But now, the message Jiang Tian sent to everyone made her feel a trace of fear in her heart. According to Jiang Tian, on the Death Hill, the explosion more than 3,000 years ago was not caused by nature, but by man. It was only caused by the powerhouses of Thunder Mountain in the West Earth who came here and formed a lightning portal. Chapter 1062. West Earth, Thunder Mountain. He had a strong physical body and was best at thunder techniques. The lethality of such lightning was comparable to that of a nuclear weapon. Only the Coelian's long-range attacks could surpass his lethality. In close-range attacks, he was invincible and could destroy everything. Even the thunder technique master, Zhang Qianlei, might not be able to withstand it. Keynes scolded the Indian admiral and threatened him. Finally, he forced him to agree that the Taichu aircraft carrier could enter the Indian Ocean with a medium-sized Coelian. Then, he ran over to report and asked for credit. Commander Tang, when will Immortal Master Jiang come back? He promised to make me the Secretary of Defense of the United States, but it hasn't happened yet. The secret of the Death Hill ruins was provided to Immortal Master Jiang. I can be considered to have done something. When Master comes back, I will naturally report to him. Tang Linglong was helpless. Keynes looked mighty and domineering. He was the general of the largest country in the world, but he was also a fan of politics. Guardian Yi, do you think something will happen to Sect Master? He has been in the heavenly state for 2 months. At the mention of Jiang Tian, Sasaki Haisha's handsome face became serious as she asked with concern. He won't. Yi Tianren's white robe fluttered in the wind like an immortal. He said confidently, when immortal Master Jiang dominated the star dimension, no one thought he would win. But he still won. Although Master is at the Foundation Establishment realm, he tried to break through to the Golden Core realm several times and then suppressed it forcefully. He is actually equivalent to a Golden Core realm expert. And he is far stronger than ordinary Golden Cores. Golden Core. Master once said that only when one is at the Qi Refinement realm and Foundation Establishment realm, one can form a Golden Core with the highest probability. The higher the quality of the Golden Core, the better. Do you have any opinions on this? Sasaki Haisha gradually relaxed and immediately asked Yi Tianren for advice. The Tianqing school's disciples never hid anything. Yi Tianren naturally told her everything and gave her a lot of advice. Yi Tianren's knowledge and experience were extraordinary. During the trip to the Stellar Sky Domain, he had also received careful guidance from Jiang Tian. Many of Sasaki Kaisha's problems were solved. She was enlightened and benefited a lot. This was the magnanimity of Tianqing school. Yi Tianren would not only give guidance to his fellow disciples, but he would also give guidance to all the powerhouses who were on good terms with Tianqing school. He would educate everyone regardless of their background. He and the Wolf King had even discussed how to use the power of the stars and moonlight. On the other hand, Tang Linglong snorted coldly and sneered, "Of course Master is fine." It was that Huang Linger. Was she crazy? Why did she insist on following him? Didn't her master travel through space to protect her? She's only in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, what can she do to help? Yi Tianren smiled bitterly and did not reply. He knew that Jiang Tian's female disciples had complicated feelings for Jiang Tian, but Jiang Tian did not have the time to care about these things. They also knew that Jiang Tian would not have feelings for them. They could only hide their improper thoughts in the bottom of their hearts and did not dare to reveal it to Jiang Tian. However, it was inevitable for them to be jealous of each other. Fortunately, Tianqing school's rules were very strict. No matter how much they fought on normal days, once they were on the battlefield, they cooperated well and killed the enemy bravely. Therefore, these things were not a big deal. No matter what, Ling is doing it for Master's sake. That's the heavenly kingdom. Do you have the guts? Sasaki Kaisha retorted sarcastically. What are you shouting for? You're just jealous because Huang Linger and Master have a relationship. Tang Linglong smiled faintly and said, Master said clearly that he doesn't need us to follow him. Don't you understand that? Do you think Master's words are a joke? Don't use Master to pressure me. Humph. You're not qualified to represent Master. Put away your infatuated dreams. Master only treats you as a disciple. Sasaki Kaisha was speechless for a moment, but she sneered a few times, looking very disdainful. What do you mean? Tang Linglong's pretty face sank, and she said coldly, not convinced? If you're not convinced, then let's fight. I'll let you know what it means to be a senior sister. You think I'm afraid of you? Sasaki Kaisha and Huang Linger had a close relationship, but it was not the same for Tang Linglong. Because the conflict between Jiang Tian and the Sakura Association was caused by Tang Linglong going to Donghai. Previously, when Jiang Tian was trapped in the Sword Tomb Island, Tang Linglong went to Tianqing school to complain that Zhao Xueqing and everyone else did not rescue Jiang Tian, and she fought with Sasaki Kaisha. After that, Tang Linglong had been suppressing the power of the Sakura Association in Tianqing school, so Sasaki Kaisha was very displeased with her. Hearing this, Yi Tianren frowned and said coldly, the enemy is right in front of us. Don't act recklessly. Everyone listened to the words of the senior brother and the left protector. Tang Linglong and Sasaki Kaisha looked at each other angrily, their eyes clearly saying that they would have a good fight after this battle was over. There's a change. A trace of seriousness appeared on Tang Linglong's face as she looked at the sky in the distance. It was clear that there were no clouds in the sky, but streaks of lightning as thick as an arm began to burst out. They were of different lengths, with the longest being 100 meters long. They were even more dazzling than the sun in the sky. It looked terrifying. The radiation is strong. The report of the military scientist in front of them rang out in their earphones. It was accompanied by a grating noise that made their eardrums very uncomfortable. It's beyond conventional nuclear radiation. Twice the conventional nuclear radiation. It's still rising. We can't take it anymore. The ray detector is malfunctioning. Please retreat. The gate of heaven is shaking violently. Someone is using a secret treasure to forcibly break through the space. Tang Linglong ordered them to retreat. Many of the generals present looked solemn. According to Master, the secret treasure of space is a supreme-grade spirit treasure that only golden core cultivators can own and use. It is very rare in all the major dimensions. This time, the person who is coming is not to be trifled with. Yi Tianren narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice. After Jiang Tian obtained the soul of the Brahmin Kasayapa guru, he used the soul devourer to search for information about him and immediately sent it to Yi Tianren with his immortal will. Yi Tianren only learned about it then. Kasayapa guru was actually a guardian of the ageless sect in West Earth. More than 2,000 years ago, he went to the mortal world and used some of the secret arts of the ageless sect to establish the Brahmin sect. The ageless sect was second only to the top forces in West Earth, such as Thunder Mountain, Tingyu Tower, and Tianhuang Pavilion. Kasayapa Guru was also responsible for expanding the influence and sphere of influence of the Brahmin before the spirit chi recovered. He was fully prepared for the arrival of the overlords of West Earth and the fight for control of Earth. In fact, he was doing a good job. Although the Brahmin didn't have as many believers as the Holy See, they also had many powerful overlords and had successfully infiltrated the political leaders, rich people, scientists, scholars, opinion leaders, and so on. The cultivation method of the ascetic abstinence precepts to prolong one's life, especially the secret method of reincarnation, had a fatal temptation. Some people wanted to reincarnate and live forever, while others didn't want their loved ones to leave and tried to resurrect them. They all became their believers. Moreover, the Brahmin could do it. They had a set of effective techniques and many successful precedents. They had already gained a lot of support and believers. Even the high-level officials in Washington and Huaxia were his believers. In fact, after an investigation, they found out Jiang Tian and the Tianqing school were once in danger. Because the high-level officials of a country among the believers of Kasayapa once wanted to use nuclear weapons against Jiang Tian and the Tianqing school. However, the Coelian defense system greatly reduced the possibility of nuclear weapons being effective. In the end, this proposal was left unsettled. And when Jiang Tian took action against the Holy See this time, he used only 1 day and 1 night to destroy the Holy See and the Brahmin. These believers were afraid of Jiang Tian's power and didn't dare to act rashly. In short, the Holy See took advantage of the middle and lower class people's desire for redemption and walked the path of the lower class. The Brahmin walked the path of the elite and targeted the high-level officials. At the same time, they kept a low profile and were rarely known. But in terms of actual influence, the Brahmin even surpassed the Holy See. Now, Jiang Tian had smashed the plan of the heavenly world for more than 2,000 years and wiped out the Brahmin. How could the people of West Earth tolerate it? This was an unprecedented loss and provocation to them that they couldn't bear. This time, the West Earth world would definitely send out super-powerful overlords. They would even use their spirit treasures to split open the space crystal wall and take revenge on Earth. This challenge was unprecedented and would never be repeated. Then, in the sky above the ruins of the Death Hill, the lightning that was flashing randomly in the sky gradually became relatively stable. And it formed a giant gate with a radius of 100 feet. On it, the lightning intertwined into many runes as if it led to another world. In the lightning and thunder gate, the energy waves became more and more intense. It shook rapidly, as if something was going to break through the void and come through. Everyone looked solemn and uneasy, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Once he appears, ask him to retreat immediately. If he doesn't, kill him immediately. Tang Linglong saw this and shouted viciously. Yes. Around her, the senior generals of various countries, including Canes, shouted with firm eyes. In an instant, a murderous aura filled the sky above the Death Hill. The battlefield within 30 miles was solemn and all the soldiers were extremely nervous.